that there are a number of very, very nervous people at ringside. This is the year in which two heavyweights who had a chance to make big money in title fights both lost to potential setups.
Freitas Prescott gained a lot of clout when he had knocked out Amir Khan in the first round, giving him his first loss. Since then, Prescott has not done much, losing twice in a row. After the second straight loss, Prescott had moved up to junior welterweight, shortly after the time Khan had moved up and picked up a title. With the immediate success of Amir Khan, that one loss on his resume against Prescott would always loom around him. With Prescott trash-talking Khan to gather attention for a rematch, Prescott found himself in a position to become Khan's mandatory opponent against Paul McCloskey. Prescott will lose in a too close to call decision, but this was not the last chance of setting up this grudge match against Amir Khan. All Prescott had to do was win against undefeated prospect Mike Alvarado for the IBF Latino belt. Prescott looked impressive early, stacking up a big lead. Alvarado started to catch up late in the fight. By the 10th and final round, Prescott is up on all three judges' scorecards. All he has to do is stand up. Alvarado cracks through the incredibly tired Prescott to drop him at the halfway point of the round. Prescott would get up, but he was completely out of it. A massive uppercut sends Prescott out on his feet and defenseless. Tate is forced to step in and stop the fight, spawning a new contender in the sport and sending Prescott out of the world rankings.
If Tate separates them, he's going to stop the fight.
Good stoppage.
Very good stoppage. Prescott was out on his feet.
Eubank Jr. slowly but surely put himself in the mix as a next potential opponent for Gennady Golovkin. All he had to do was get past Liam Smith. So in the lead up to the fight, Eubank Jr. took in Roy Jones Jr. as his trainer. Instead of taking the best of Roy had to give and implementing it into his already existing style, which would have been an improvement, Chris decided to try and completely use Roy's style from offense to defense. Now, fully adapting Roy's defense is a big no. Roy's defense works for Roy when he was in his prime. He was so fast, his reflexes was insane, but if he slows down just a little bit, that's when it gets dangerous to where your night can come to an end. Roy's offense was also doing a great bit of lifting, hiding these defensive flaws. The power of Roy, his hand speed, reflexes, and killer feints was the X factor. That would have guys keep it conservative with Roy, but when you don't have that, and you have a guy who knows how to cut off the ring and keep fighters in the corner, you should not be using a Roy Jones defense, specifically on the ropes. Tarver rematch, back foot in the corner, the Johnson fight in the corner, Green in the corner. The Lebedev fight, Roy was closing the fight strong, wobbled Lebedev in the 9th, and was putting on a show in the final round. Showboating and all to get put away in the ropes. Then lastly against Enzo Macronelli. You have Eubank, who doesn't have the reflexes of a prime Roy. Speed, power, while trying to fight identically like him against a guy who is somewhat like a Glenn Johnson, but is far more athletic and equal, if not better, at putting punches together. Smith didn't really start doing anything offensively till the 4th round until he had adjusted to Eubank Jr. Then he ended the fight rather anticlimactically in the corner, leaving Chris out on his feet, forcing the ref to wave off the fight.
Catches him. Coming in, Eubank's in all sorts of trouble. Liam Smith's going to stop Chris Eubank Jr. Again, it's waved off by Victor Lachlan. And Liam Smith has made the statement of all statements. I think Chris Eubank thinks he's still in the fight.
Rashidi Ellis was an amazing, talented prospect that seemed to have been put on the shelf for quite a while despite coming off a massive win in 2020 against undefeated boxing prospect Alexis Rocha, in which Ellis already came off a massive layoff due to the pandemic and probably politics. You can tell Ellis wanted to say something in interviews but just held back and just remained professional. In 2022, Ellis's career was put back on track after signing to PBC, which at this moment holds a stacked stable in the welterweight division. Ellis has his first fight in 2 years, which it ends very quickly. His next fight was against heavy-handed Roman Villa. The narrative coming into this fight is probably setting up a fight with rising star Boots Ennis. Pretty much it's looking like it's a win and you're it type of deal to be in that exclusive mix to be in a big fight. Just look at what Rashidi has to offer as a fighter. So fight night, this was Ellis's time to shine, and he sure was looking good. Exactly what I was expecting to see on this stage, because I've been following this man's career for quite a while. Villa started to turn it up in the later portion of the fight, but it was not enough to win on the scorecards coming into the 12th round, unless we see a Cleveland Browns level of collapse. Just maybe, which is a Hail Mary, Villa pulls it off. Halfway through the 12th, Ellis gets dropped by Villa. Ellis then gets dropped again in the final 6 seconds. Due to these two knockdowns, Villa pulls away with a close majority decision win. It's 2008. Roy Jones Jr. ran a 2-year campaign back into the ranks with an underrated, brilliant performance against Prince Badi Ajamu for the WBO NBO title.
Yeah, proud man. It's still as flash as ever, and it's all over now. It's all over now, and I don't think there's going to be many friendly gestures here from Ajamu.
Then a huge win against undefeated prospect, IBF ranked Anthony Hanshaw.
And now he lands a combination. And a little flash by Roy Jones Jr. There he is, a little dancing thing. Oh, nice. They got him. Let down. Big left hook and the right hand. From the knees. Hanshaw's in trouble. And it is for the knockdown.
This put Roy Jones back into the spotlight, ranked in the top 5 by Ring Magazine. The fight with Trinidad displayed that Roy can still perform despite his shortcomings in the mid-2000s, also proving that there was a market waiting for Roy to make it back on this stage. With the help of Tito's star power, this fight brought in 500,000 pay-per-view buys. This would set up a big fight with Welsh legend and light heavyweight champion Joe Calzaghe. If Roy were to win, this would set up a MAGA rematch against Bernard Hopkins, who was present front row at the fight, anxiously hoping Roy will pull off the upset. Hopkins the month prior completely dismantled the middleweight champion Kelly Pavlik, which had put him back in the mix for a big fight. Unfortunately, despite Roy coming close in the first round where Joe's legs were completely gone, he still managed to recover so quickly, make it out the round to change the tide and win the fight by unanimous decision. There was another opportunity to set up this anticipated rematch, a less risky, more conservative route. And early 2009 have his comeback fight against former contender Omar Shika, in which he would dominate him, winning by 5th round stoppage for the WBO NBO title. Roy then would fight former super middleweight title holder Jeff Lacey. This was a fight to set up a big fight in Australia against former WBA and current IBO cruiserweight champ Danny Green. Most who knew Danny Green just known him for that guy in the sparring tapes from 2004 going in the trenches with James Toney. Danny was fighting on the co-main on the Jones-Lacey event. Green did his business, stopping his guy in the 5th round, and Roy did his end of the bargain, putting on one of his greatest performances. Watching this live on pay-per-view was a nostalgic treat because you saw everything you loved with Roy, and then some, followed up with Roy and Danny doing a post-fight promo calling each other out.
I think insult on top of injury. Yeah. You let the guy just walk away and you're talking to the camera, talking to everybody else. Roy Jones is like a preacher giving a real good message right now. Yeah.
It was 100% certain that Hopkins and Golden Boy that Roy was going to win his fight against Green. Their rematch was a done deal, more than likely to be shown on HBO pay-per-view with an HBO Countdown documentary, or if we're really lucky, a 24/7. Both Roy and Hopkins fought on the same day in different time zones. Since this was before social media and news coming in real time, the Roy fight was first, but Hopkins refused to watch the fight till after his fight was finished. Unfortunately, Roy would get dropped in the first round, was unable to defend himself, thus causing the fight to be stopped. If Roy was just able to get a hold or two, or really anything, Danny would have been more than likely punched out coming into the second round. Hopkins, watching the fight after his fight, was an utter shock and disappointment. This completely ruined the promotion for the rematch. HBO refused to take the fight. They did quietly promote the fight, from what I remember, on their Comcast on-demand services. The pay-per-view bombed, ticket sales were not good, and it was rumored that tickets were practically being given away to people for free that happened to be booking a room at the Mandalay Bay for that weekend. Due to the combination of poor ticket sales and pay-per-view buys, Roy pretty much fought for free, which, not knowing the financial situation with the sales of the fight when I was watching it live, fight in general just felt a bit strange. Both guys were out there not really trying to hurt one another. Played it conservative. You did have one crazy moment, but overall it was hollow. Back with the video in a short bit. Be sure to hit that like button to help the rest of the good old subscribers be able to view this video. This video's comment section question is, what are 3 fights, boxing or MMA, you would always introduce to someone new to the sport or try to get them into the sport? Leave in the comments. Mine is the Pacquiao-Marquez series, and one real gem of a fight, Samsak Sichichachawan versus Mahar Mashipur for the WBA Super Bantamweight title. This fight was so crazy action-wise, upon being submitted, Ring Magazine had to acknowledge this fight as a 2006 Fight of the Year, despite knowing most who read this publication would not have easy access viewing this fight due to it only being broadcasted in France. Tommy was quickly becoming a massive draw in the heavyweight division thanks to his role in the Rocky movie, and a crowd-friendly style that somewhat resembled the likes of Mike Tyson. And since Mike was in prison during this time, that further inflated Morrison's brand. It's 1991, and Tommy's finally in line to fight for the title against WBO champ Ray Mercer. Morrison was seen as the immediate favorite coming into the fight, and boxing analysts was already looking ahead of this fight and looking at who will be Morrison's next fight, which would be against rising star Lennox Lewis.
Well, I have to say that I got to tell you the truth. I was leaning toward Ray Mercer very strongly. I've been saying Ray Mercer. I just changed my mind. Tommy Morrison, I think he's in better shape.
Yeah, it's really funny. I said exactly, I feel exactly this.
Holyfield and Bo out of the picture at the moment. This was one of the most meaningful matchups to be made in the early 90s. All Morrison had to do was get past Ray Mercer. Mercer, who was an Olympic gold medalist, the champion, and fought better competition at that time, undoubtedly took this personal, making it his mission to make a statement and ruin such plans for the heavyweight star. This is a recipe for a great fight. Morrison started the fight rather quick, being first and just beating Mercer to the punch, easily raking in the first 3 rounds. Mercer, coming into the 4th round, started to pick it up offensively, and then it showed Morrison may have been punched out. By this point in Morrison's career, he had not fought past the 6th round, despite fighting 3 10-round fights, but those ended very early. Mercer, who had fought much less than Morrison with the record of 17-0, coming in started fighting 10-rounders by his 9th pro bout and had already fought 3 12-rounders, 2 going the distance. The 5th round, Morrison hit the wall, lost his concentration, got stuck in the corner, and Mercer took full advantage and got Morrison out of there. Awful officiating by the ref. Morrison is clearly out on his feet and stuck on the ropes. Fight should have been stopped earlier. Morrison would quickly rebound back into the mix as Lennox Lewis is on the cusp of becoming the WBC champion. Morrison's coming out party to become the WBO champ June of '93 against George Foreman. Morrison will win by unanimous decision and quickly jump into another fight barely 50 days later to successfully defend the title. The unification with Lennox Lewis is a done deal. Morrison does not have to fight anymore for the rest of the year. According to the HBO broadcast, this was Morrison's decision to go forward with this year-ender fight.
Tommy Morrison himself wants this fight. I think he thinks he has to beat a fighter like this to prove to himself that he can take on a boxer like a Lennox Lewis. but there are a lot of nervous people here, and we've seen stranger things happen.
What you're saying is that he had the Lewis fight in the pocket. He didn't have to take this fight. He did it, not his handlers, huh?
$7.5 million for that fight, and he's making about a fifth of that for this fight.
Obviously, if he wins, it will make the promotion for the Lewis fight massive. Morrison would start the fight quick and get bent on the defensive. He would buckle him and get him hurt, but Morrison was leaving himself too open, letting his hands go. Bent, obviously aware that the fight was going to get here, is displaying a very tight guard, waiting to time Morrison with the perfectly placed shot. At that moment here, Morrison should have taken a step back because Bent had found his rhythm and got Morrison's timing locked in. Morrison rushes in again with the same pattern, which Bent wins the exchange and drops Morrison.
Oh, Tommy stunned by right hand, and down goes Morrison.
Morrison's legs are gone, and unfortunately he was not able to recover, resulting in a massive TKO upset win for Bent. $7.5 million guaranteed, plus whatever revenue that may come with the lead up to this big fight, down the drain. Morrison would rebound in a big way after giving Razor Ruddock his second round loss in a 6th round thriller that would set up a Lewis fight for the WBC title.
10 more seconds, and it's a long one. He will not do it.
Morrison's loss to Bent actually affected both his and Lewis's purse, as both received just above $2 million. Morrison at 2.1 and Lewis at 2.4. Mike Jones was a rising prospect and contender. Jones was very talented at the time, a force in the weight class, but he would throw himself out of well-controlled situations. The fight with Soto Karass will foreshadow what is in store. Yes, this was certainly entertaining, but this is possibly the dumbest, most boneheaded move I've ever seen in a fight. Mike is loading up on all of his shots for a full minute. Some shots did get through. Karass did get cut, but a lot missed. Jones was so punched out and tired from that offense that he was barely able to defend himself from Karass. Jones was immobilized for 6 straight rounds. He didn't pick it back up really offensively till the final 3 rounds, which was just enough to score a draw on Harold Letterman's scorecards. Mike would be awarded a razor-thin unanimous decision, and obviously there would be a rematch. Jones would fight a lot more controlled in the rematch and win more convincingly on the scorecards. Fast forward a year later, Mike is in line to fight for the vacant IBF title against Randall Bailey. This would most certainly put Jones in the mix to unify against Manny Pacquiao if he were to get past Tim Bradley, since Mike Jones is a top-ranked fighter. So Randall Bailey is one of the hardest punchers of all time, from 140 pounds to 147. Nevada rules: if 2 fighters are fighting at welterweight, they are allowed to choose what size gloves they want to use in a fight, but both parties must come to agreement. The A side, Mike Jones, for some reason wanted to use 8-ounce gloves, which is absolutely ridiculous because obviously Bailey is going to take what he can get, and this favors Bailey way more than it favors Jones, who has every single advantage in this matchup. So Jones easily breaks in every round. It's a walk in the park because Randall is trying to look for one big shot and Jones is fighting incredibly intelligent. Hope is lost in Bailey from his corner to where John David Jackson gives up. Bailey is mentally out of the fight despite physically being in the best shape of his career. The chief second of Bailey's corner took over and delivered one of the most memorable and inspiring corner speeches of the 2010s.
You're gonna leave that shit in there. He's gonna take that out from you. Come on, man. You need to whip his ass now. He's not tomorrow now. Whip his ass. You understand?
Shortly later, Bailey wakes up, finally finds his opening, and drops Mike Jones. Mike gets up easily and finishes the round. Mike is so far up the cards, all he has to do, sync the fight up, hold, whatever, and he's the champion. The knockdown had completely rattled Jones' rhythm to where he was overly on the defensive, trying to protect himself from the straight hand, which little he knew, Bailey is also known for amazing uppercuts. With Jones' high guard, he left himself not only open, but there was no way he could have seen that uppercut coming, which resulted him getting knocked out on the spot. Very sad, as this completely ruined a young promising fighter's career, but also cemented another fighter's career who has had numerous setbacks and finally got his due.
Look at John David Jackson's reaction after he was thoroughly disgusted for several preceding rounds.
Coming into 2019, Matchroom Sport took the boxing world by storm, and they were starting to hold a major political power in the new glamour division of heavyweight after Anthony Joshua had finished picking up all but one of the belts coming into 2019. The final belt belonging to Deontay Wilder, which that matchup was being held up due to politics, and Wilder's team trying to get above Joshua in negotiations by trying to go after Tyson Fury. A win there would put Wilder as a lineal champion, and that would change how negotiations are for the Joshua fight. To expand on Joshua's dominance in the heavyweight division, he went to America to make his US debut against Big Baby Miller. That matchup got canceled, and Andy Ruiz, who was available, ranked by the belt organizations, and fight shape ready, filled in Miller's place. The fight would start off well for Joshua. It all went downhill when Joshua dropped Ruiz and began to not use his long range finishing the fight, but instead fighting Ruiz right in his range, which is not a very cash money move because Ruiz's reach is incredibly short for heavyweight standards. Ruiz drops Joshua in the process, and Joshua was never able to really recover, getting exhausted in the process where he was just a sitting duck for Ruiz's shots, especially since Joshua never adjusted to staying out of Ruiz's range and holding the second he gets close. Ruiz will later stop Joshua in the 7th round. Despite Joshua coming back and regaining the titles, politically this ruined Joshua and Matchroom's hold in the weight class as an A side, as the winner of the Wilder Fury rematch will decide who is not only the lineal champion but the Ring Magazine champion as well. Due to Joshua's loss, that had moved Fury and Wilder to number 1 and number 2 in the Ring Magazine ranks. After Mike Tyson's loss against Lennox Lewis, he came back hungry and motivated, especially since he had a mountain of debt to pay off. In his comeback fight, he went up against Clifford E. Tyson looked incredibly impressive, fast, sharp, using beautiful head movement, certainly many shades of his former self, then to knock Clifford out 49 seconds into the fight. Since Tyson was finally approaching the end of his Showtime contract, this caught the eye of top-ranked Bob Arum. Lennox Lewis was about to retire, the heavyweight division was in utter chaos of a promotion power grab, there was some massive fights to be made. Bob Arum and HBO was going to carefully guide Tyson to that. This plan was designed to get Tyson out of his $38 million of debt. This HBO deal was worth $80 million. This would involve crowd-pleasing fights that would provide highlight reel wins, a possible title fight against Vitali Klitschko, and a mega fight with Roy Jones Jr. as there were talks and the lead-up set up by Jay Prince. All Tyson had to do was win his next fight against Danny Williams. The fight was actually going Tyson's way, he had stunned Williams, but it would take a turn for the worst when Tyson had torn a ligament in his knee. This not only messed up Tyson's mobility and defense, but the worst part is he has no power on his shots because he can't set himself up like he wants to. Danny knew something was wrong, and it gave him confidence to press forward with his offense, which eventually led to Williams dropping Tyson with a barrage of shots and Tyson unable to make the count.
He's in big trouble and he goes down. Only the ropes kept him out. 38-year-old Mike Tyson. We could be on the brink of a sensation.
When this happened, it was really sad because you don't know where his career will go, as this is the end of the road. But in retrospect, it was more of a short-term gain and a short-term loss. He would have been out of debt, but the public persona would have been the same towards him, which was mostly nasty and negative.
Instead of hearing people say, wow, there goes Mike Tyson. The great, he's so fantastic, he says. Now he hears negative things. In any situation where Mike was under pressure, there was no stability. There was no deep inner belief that he had to control himself.
The award-winning 2008 Tyson documentary, after his retirement of his side of the story, really did open many of his life, changing the public perception of Tyson. He got a chance to star in a very successful movie, revitalizing his career to where he took this second chance and really came out victorious where he's debt-free, coming into the 2020s. Amazing steady income and wealth that he could pass on to his children. A night and day change in the general public's perception of him.
As a fan of Mike Tyson, I love him, and I don't mean,
you.
I love you, man. I'm just disappointed and hurt at how much comfort white people have around you now. I don't like it.
As one of the greatest and wholesome combat stories to come by.
You need to know that I'm very proud of you and pleased with you and the way you've gone with your life and doing the right thing. And I would love to meet your wife sometime. Tell her I said good job. Thank you. Okay. God willing. Good luck. I'll see you this fall. Thank you, sir. Thank you, man.
I'm just tired of fighting. Boxing has no place in my heart anymore.
After Judah's 12-round defeat against Paulie Malignaggi in the Battle of Brooklyn in 2013, Judah would take a hiatus from the ring and take time with his family, furthering his career in the medical field, getting his certification, becoming a nurse, where he was treating dementia and Alzheimer's disease patients. Judah would come back in 2017 and go 2-0. In 2019, he was set up to face hard-punching prospect Cletus Selden for the vacant North American regional title. Looking good in spurts, Zab just didn't have the strength and the youthful energy to keep Cletus off of him, who was outworking and punching him round by round.
Look at that body work. Now, it's not that they stepped on each other's feet, or did he get hit with a shot?
In the 11th round, the ref did not like what he was seeing, and he put a stop to the fight, despite Judah's relentless protests. What would happen would scare the entire boxing scene. News came out that Judah had passed away. Then, he was in a coma. According to the official reports, he was submitted to the hospital where there was some bleeding from the brain. He was treated, cleared, and released the following week from the hospital. Erik Morales caught the whole world off guard when he turned back the clock against Marcos Maidana with impaired vision and just fell short completing the upset in the final quarter of their fight.
All of a sudden, Maidana has found the second win. Look at him take Morales' hard shots. Erik Morales, unbelievable.
With many eyes on his next move, his performance that night granted him one last title shot, which was against undefeated contender Pablo Cesar Cano for the vacant WBC title, and Morales would come up victorious, stopping Cano.
Rudy Perez asks Kenny Bayless to stop the fight.
It's a good call.
In Morales' first defense, he would fight Danny Garcia. The fight was incredibly close, and by the time the open scores would come in and reveal the typical Texas officiating controversy, the fight could go either way. Once the scorecards was revealed, Morales' trainer was absolutely disgusted by them and urged Morales to pick up the offense and go for the knockout.
We're losing the damn fight. All the rounds. They gave him all the rounds. Only round one judge is giving you. All the rounds are lost. This son of a bitch, you gotta finish him. Even if you finish the fight, they're gonna give it if you're winning. The judges are gonna give it to him. To win by the judges, you see you can win the fight, but the judges, this is here, the judges are giving it to him.
Despite Morales beginning to have more success and really having a big round against Danny, he left himself open and Danny cracked him with his signature shot, leveling Morales and completely disrupting the momentum in the fight.
Right hand shot by Morales. Now Morales is trying to scrape out wins, fighting above his normal weight at 140. Good body shot by Erik Morales. Good rally in this round.
Garcia virtually.
Otherwise, Danny Garcia doing not to bother to try to make the 140-pound weight.
If not for the terrible judging to where the judges somehow had Morales losing every round, it may have changed quite a bit how Morales approached Danny later in the fight.
Garcia's nose has been swelling, and now Morales has basically popped it open.
And Garcia keeps his head in one spot with his puncher, which makes it.
Oh! Down goes Erik Morales!
Due to the controversy, Morales was given a rematch later that year after Garcia had upsetted Mir Khan in their unification. This was for the WBC, WBA, and Ring Magazine titles. Morales nowhere near resembled the fighter that turned back the clock a year earlier. He was flat-footed, lacked coordination and snap in his punches, and was a sitting duck for anything Danny threw. Danny would knock Morales into retirement in the 4th round.
Real
quick, Oscar. Hatton wants to fight Mayweather again, but I think you got first dibs on Floyd, don't you?
Well, we're discussing it, and I can guarantee you one thing right now. I will beat him. I will.
Yeah, will you guarantee when you're going to fight him?
Well, the date is not set in stone yet. There's nothing signed, but with Floyd Sr. in my corner, I will get him.
After a failed attempt to get a rematch with Floyd for the September 2008 slot, lightweight champion and newly crowned pound-for-pound king Manny Pacquiao was chosen to be Oscar's opponent. Oscar had underwent an experimental diet to make welterweight in this fight. Despite very occasional flashes of energy, Oscar was completely sapped and Manny was way too fast and strong for the drained Oscar. Oscar will retire from his corner in between rounds, resulting in a TKO victory for Manny, spawning a new superstar in the sport of boxing's glamour division. Bernard Hopkins had defied the odds and kept on fighting at a world-class level for many years, well into his 40s. Hopkins would defeat WBA champion Bebut Shumanov in their unification at 49 years of age. After boxing's Cold War had ended, and possibly a failed attempt to fight Adonis Stevenson,
we are with Showtime until I end my career, and whatever big fight it is, I want to be the undisputed light heavyweight champion of the world before 50.
And
Stevenson, I'm coming to Canada. I'm getting my papers together.
One more thought here. One more thought. Hold on.
Golden Boy Promotions had moved back to HBO and restored their relations with them, and Hopkins went on to fight Sergey Kovalev. The moments Hopkins had
requires a kind of power that he hasn't got himself. Bernard's hitting him here. Light heavyweight's on the way up. Oh! Kovalev is hurt.
Yeah, you hurt. I told you that's what Bernard was looking for.
buried in the depths by what Sergey did to Hopkins, dropping him for the first time in God knows how long and scoring pretty much a shutout in the scorecards. At this advanced age in Hopkins' career, the worst thing that he can do in this situation is take too long of a break. Hopkins was out of the ring for 2 years before he got to fight in what would be his retirement fight against hard-punching contender Joe Smith Jr. Joe had came off a huge upset victory, knocking out Andres Fonfara prior to this fight. That was supposed to have been a setup fight for Fonfara to fight Stevenson in a rematch. Out the gate, Hopkins did not look good. He did not look sharp, didn't have the strength nor the power that would keep his opponents honest. Despite cracking through Smith's defense numerous times, the power was just not there, and Smith did not once respect it. Smith would knock Hopkins out of the ring. Hopkins would receive a 20 count despite someone touching Hopkins, which should immediately nullify the count and make it an automatic loss. But that wouldn't matter as Hopkins injured his shoulder and could not make the 20 count, resulting in a knockout loss. After Germaine Taylor hit his head very hard on the canvas in his 2009 bout against Arthur Abraham, mentally and physically Taylor was never the same. Accompanied by substance abuse, this furthered Taylor's psyche to where he is not only harming himself but his family members and others while pursuing a comeback in the sport, which many onlookers did not agree due to his mental state. In August 2014, Germaine Taylor was arrested for crimes I can't say here, then to be released on a $25,000 bail to fight for the IBF title against Sam Solomon in October. Media was outraged due to the IBF honoring this vacant title grab. I'm pretty sure Al Heyman that made it happen, and DeBella felt like helping Taylor out, and hopefully this will keep him on the right path and stay out of trouble. But did not look too far in the future because Gennady Golovkin wanted to fight the winner of this fight. Peter Quillen, a Al Heyman fighter, was in the crowd, and the mandatory for the IBF title was Hassam Endam, who just came off defeating Curtis Stevens. Any of these guys pose a serious threat to the health of Taylor. The most unexpected events will take place. Sam Solomon got injured and fought with one leg for a majority of the fight to where Taylor was able to earn a decision, surprisingly not that wide on the scorecards despite Solomon going down in 7, 8, 9, and 11. And the notes it states that Taylor was given one involuntary title defense, which that was against Sergio Mora, and just before Taylor could even make that defense, Taylor was arrested due to a weapons discharge while being on probation for the previous offense from 2014. Taylor was later stripped of the title and will fall into a sad spiral, numerous assault-related incidents due to psychiatric problems. After a KO defeat against Jose Luis Castillo in their rematch, Corrales' titles were not on the line as Castillo did not make weight. Corrales then would fight Yoel Casamayor, in which he would just come in short and lose by a split decision. Coming into 2007, he will then fight feared opponent, the massive Joshua Clottey, at a catchweight of 149. Now Corrales was a good featherweight, lightweight, and superb junior welterweight, but the thought of him fighting at junior middle doesn't sound good. It didn't sound good in 2006 and certainly did not in 2023. Looking at the fight day weight, there seemed to be no rehydration clause, as Corrales weighed in at 160 on fight day and Clottey at 170 pounds. Also, keep in mind that Showtime labeled this Corrales' welterweight debut, but both guys weighed in over the welterweight limit, therefore they are junior middleweights. Clottey would give Diego the most one-sided loss of his career since the Mayweather fight.
Two combination, beautiful again. Here's the score with uppercuts and hooks. Combination of that big one. Scheduled for 10. Beautiful combination upstairs and back and forth action. While he's winning this set by Clottey. Clottey with a left hook, an uppercut, a right, a left, and he's all over Corrales. Body. What is holding Corrales up? He goes down.
Corrales would cut it close, finishing the fight on his feet to go 10 full rounds. I think despite this loss, Corrales had a bit left to give to the sport of boxing. This was just a bad style matchup and a weight class he had no business in. Unfortunate events will take place and the boxing world will lose Corrales exactly a month after the Clottey fight and a bike accident on Cinco de Mayo weekend. After getting knocked out in the first round by Ernie Shavers, Ken jumped right back in the ring 5 months later against Scott Ledoux. Ken would barely scrape away with a draw in the scorecards. Norton being thumbed in the eye in the 8th round played a big role in how the fight would close out for him, as it impaired his vision.
That is not fight. At first the referee. No, the referee says no. The fight is not stopped. The referee says no.
Norton would retire shortly after this fight after the passing of his manager. He would come back out of retirement despite being dissatisfied with how his career ended. His opponent is the undefeated Randall Tex Cobb. Cobb, coming in, was ranked number 9 by the WBC. This will be a 10-round nail-biter for Norton. He was showing clear signs in the later stages of the fight. He would muscle up the will and even things up on the cards to where it all rested on the final round. Norton would take home the split decision victory.
Maybe fight Muhammad Ali. Norton's throwing everything in there. He's calling on the reserves. Norton is throwing everything in there. He's not saving anything for tomorrow. Norton gets the heavyweight fight of the year.
Instead of riding off into the sunset with a huge win against an undefeated contender, Ken pressed his luck and decided to fight for it all against undefeated contender Jerry Cooney. The winner would more than likely face the champion Larry Holmes. Ken Norton was ranked number 10 by Ring Magazine, Cooney number 2. Cooney was also ranked number 1 by the WBC and WBA. Norton will get caught off guard by Cooney starting to fight fast and his power. This resulted in Cooney putting away Norton within the first minute of the fight in brutal fashion. Norton, following the loss, will retire from the sport. In 1965, a very well past his prime Sugar Ray Robinson was making one last title run, which would be for the history books. Robinson meeting up with the middleweight champion Dick Tiger, and he was willing to give Robinson a title shot if he got past the number 1 contender, 44-1 Joey Archer. By this point in Sugar's career, it was more about pride and chasing the ultimate prize of fighting and maybe becoming champ for one last time at the age of 45. It was no longer about the money, according to a Sports Illustrated article from that time period, that the IRS had returned $344,000 back to Robinson. The documentary from the 90s tells a different story. Trying his absolute hardest, Robinson fell short and lost wide on the scorecards to where Robinson will retire from boxing for good.
Robinson was lying on a table, And Miles leaned over and said, in that hoarse croak of a voice that Miles had, he said, Ray, you're packing it in. And Robinson nodded. He says, you're right. And that was the end of it.
This is the one segment where it ends on a positive note. Robinson will be given a proper send-off with thousands in attendance.
Seinem Publikum. Nochmal frisch gemacht, so sah er aus, nachdem er aus der Kabine gekommen war und hatte alle Kampfspuren weggewischt. Auf Wiedersehen, goodbye, denkt an mich.
So this is a bit strange. The World Heavyweight title will go vacant in 1948. Joe Louis loses the NBA and lineal title against Ezra Charles in 1950. Lee Savold and Bruce Woodcock fight for the vacant World Heavyweight title. Joe Louis would beat the winner to regain the World Heavyweight title. Despite being the world champion, he does not hold the NBA or the lineal. The British Boxing Board recognized Joe Louis to be the champ, while Ezra Charles and now Jersey Joe Walcott is the NBA and lineal champion. Due to the out-of-the-ring distractions with the US government bullying the American hero into massive debt, Joe wasn't fully himself mentally, while physically he was out of his prime. A win here against undefeated star Rocky Marciano would set Louis up against Joe Walcott for the undisputed heavyweight title. Louis came in as a 6-5 betting favorite. Marciano slowly but surely moved in and tired out the old former champion. Marciano would stop Louis in the 8th round. A hard defeat for Louis, a hard win for Marciano, as he never thought of fighting one of his idols, as he cried in the locker room. Since this was a non-title fight, and since Louis lost, the British Boxing Board no longer recognized Louis as the champion. This will be Louis's final fight, and he will walk away from boxing. After Ali's historic win to regain the title against Leon Spinks, he was advised to retire from his doctor as his health seemed to be in a decline. Ali would retire and go on a humanitarian tour, visiting numerous nations.
Never before in the annals of diplomacy has there been a journey quite like that of Mr. Ambassador Muhammad Ali.
You learned a lot, so did we, and I'm very grateful for the results that you have taken. Good luck to you, and I look forward to getting a good report from you.
These are my fans, my people, because I put God first. The book says, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, then all things shall come to you. Ain't this living proof? People running for miles. People running for miles just to see and meet the champion.
Unfortunately, Ali was bitten by the bug to come back into boxing and fight for the title. He announced that he will be fighting newly crowned WBA champ John Tate, who seemed to be perfectly tailored for Ali. All Tate had to do was get past his opponent, Mike Weaver. Tate comfortably ahead in the scorecards, and Weaver needing a knockout in the final round. Weaver would somehow come out victorious, stopping Tate in the 15th round to become the WBA champ. Weaver will make a claim that Tate's hometown fans is the reason why Tate lost. He said he made a mistake slugging when he was boxing before. With Ali's eyes still in the prize of becoming champion one last time, he decided to go after the WBC champion Larry Holmes. Ali came into camp not in the best shape. Those 2 years off was not good for his body. In a desperate attempt to shed the weight off, Ali was taking thyroid medication, which acted as a fat burner. The major downside to this was it completely saps her energy, even worse side effects due to the fact Ali was not following the directions of taking once daily and took 2 pills daily.
Didn't sweat at all. The towel that I always carry on my shoulders to wipe the sweat off Ali, I used myself coming up and down the stairs, but Ali didn't sweat at all, and we didn't know why. Later on, we discovered he had been taking those pills, and they had dried him up. So as he kept fighting and not sweating, automatically lost all his ability to perform or even almost stand.
Ali on the outside looked fight ready, but in the inside he was far from it as that medication took over his body. Ali was shut out by Larry Holmes, which left those who watched incredibly saddened as Ali was taking a beating and the ref was refusing to put a stop to the contest. The fight was ultimately put to a stop in the 10th round. Despite many being worried of Ali's health, Ali went forward to fight one last time against heavyweight contender Trevor Berbick in the Bahamas. The fight was competitive early despite Ali showing clear signs he's well past his prime, showing no power in his shots and speed.
Perfect back a little bit. Ali, for the first time tonight, up on his toes. Got his jab and stay away. The crowd has come alive. Good jabs on the right.
The fight changed at the halfway point and Berbick began to put an unnecessary beating on Ali. This fight would go the distance, and due to what Ali did early, the cards was much closer than advertised. Ali would lose by unanimous decision and retire from boxing for good at the age of 39.
And people said to me, "Why are you showing up, dropping your hand?" No, I was enjoying myself because I knew it was my last fight. And I remember counting down the rounds. I remember, come on, Joe, 4 rounds to go, just enjoy it. I remember saying to myself, Joe, this is the last round of your life. That was that, you know what I mean? I was happy to do the 12 rounds and just beautiful.
Juan Manuel Marquez had an amazing career, a career that was topped off by defeating his longtime rival Manny Pacquiao. To continue this high point in his career, he fought Tim Bradley, which he lost rather convincingly to the new boxing star. That following year, Marquez decided to have one last fight against former WBO junior welterweight champ Mike Alvarado, who just got dethroned in the previous year in his first defense after defeating Brandon Rios in their rematch. Enjoy the slideshow of the greatest vehicle ever made, the Yugo GV. Marquez looks like Marquez, maybe just a tad slower. Alvarado maybe a little bit on the gun-shy side after his brutal loss against Ruslan Provodnikov. Marquez would get the knockdown in round 8. Same round Ruslan dropped Alvarado twice in. That woke Alvarado up and he tied the knockdown count and dropped Marquez the very next round, making the final bit of the fight interesting. Marquez was able to fight on and get the wide decision on the scorecards and happily retire from the sport. Crazy enough, this was a title elimination bout to become the mandatory to face Manny Pacquiao. Now there were rumors that Marquez was offered a substantial amount of money to face Pacquiao in a 5th fight, but a good gambler knows how to walk away after a big score, and no price was changing his mind. Marciano Freitas is one of the greatest boxers to come from Brazil. Even the UFC giving the man shoutouts during their broadcast whenever they have an event down there. After brutally losing to Diego Corrales in 2004, Freitas would slowly bounce back and pick up another world title in 2006 against Zahir Rahim. Freitas was set to face rising undefeated star Juan Diaz in a unification for the WBA and WBO titles. Despite being overwhelmed by Diaz's work rate, Freitas was matching Diaz with the same energy and more accurate with his shots scoring on Diaz. For a great portion of the fight, Freitas was either up on the cards or it was dead even. After a great 7th round by both guys, the tides would change in the 8th round. Diaz will finally get the better of Freitas and really start to land at a high rate. Freitas didn't believe he could go on in the fight and retired on his stool. In comparison to the Tyson McBride fight, the expression seemed very similar, and it was a look of a guy who just didn't have that fire in him to continue. And you could really get hurt that way, and good for Freitas for doing the right thing. Freitas will walk away from boxing that year. He will come back in 2012 due to a clout-chasing kid talking crap. Undefeated Brazilian boxing prospect Michael Oliveira came out on the scene claiming he's Brazil's next boxing star. With the announcement of Freitas' return, this was immediately met with doubt by the boxing media that the 36-year-old was well past his prime, just doing it for the money. The 22-year-old he's fighting is a junior middleweight, and Freitas' best days were at super featherweight and lightweight. Freitas actually came in great shape for a guy who had been out of the ring for so long. His speed was there, reflexes there, but you could hear the crowd oohing and eyeing. After putting up a flashy 2 rounds, Freitas will make Michael know, the boxing media who wrote those articles know, how good he was, and drop Michael at the end of the 3rd round.
Acciones sociales en su país.
Derecha que dolió y va con la zurda. En la cuerda quedó enmarañado Oliveira.
Freitas will put on a show. 5 years ago, he was trying to find that fire and just go through the motions. Right there, you're seeing a guy who is genuinely having fun and rediscovered his passion. Absolutely brilliant display of defense and head movement.
Oliveira.
Idea tiene, a mi juicio, de boxeo.
Puede haber algo importante frente, pero derecha que cruza Popó, vuelve a cruzar. Es todo nuevo para Oliveira. Nunca estuvo bajo esta presión, bajo este castigo.
Freitas was able to set up another knockdown in the 9th round and to top it off, get the knockout win later in that round.
Al piso, la derecha de Popó llegó. El cronómetro juega a favor de Freitas. Falta largo rato, más de 1 minuto. con la frialdad de un definidor nato. Se acabó, técnico.
Freitas will retire from boxing on top. He would come back in 2015 and once again in 2017. Those two fights he won, and he happily retired from the sport at the age of 42. 40 wins, 2 losses, 34 knockouts. After defeating Andre Berto for the NABF title in December 2013, all the way to 2018, Kaskas did not record a win. The closest he will ever win will be a draw against Yoshihiro Kamagai in a very exciting 10-round banger, not a single break in action. This would spawn an immediate rematch, and HBO wanted a piece, and this fight was slated as a co-main event under Tom Loeffler's Superfly card. Kaskas would get stopped in the 8th round after putting up a good show. In 2017, he would lose back-to-back within a 3-month span against Mauricio Herrera by majority decision and got TKO'd by Juan Carlos Abreu. To start off 2018, which would be slated as Kaskas' last fight, he was up against local favorite, undefeated prospect 17-0, Nico Macias. Nico and Kaskas are both valiant punchers, so this fight, if Kaskas still has one left in him, will be one for the books. Kaskas mostly in the corner, doing his absolute best to keep Nico off of him. Phone booth fighting, well over 100 punches thrown around. Coming to the 3rd round, both guys in total had thrown 700 punches. I think by the 4th round, both guys were punched out. Kaskas' corner was urging him to get a second wind. Kaskas was reduced to arm punches, but he would occasionally throw a loaded shot that would throw Nico's head back. Kaskas was getting so much work on the ropes that he started to get abrasions and cuts on his back. Despite both guys throwing powerless arm punches, Kaskas was getting the better of these exchanges. This would break punch stat records for most punches ever thrown in a fight. That record remained unbeaten for 25 years. Kaskas will not only be in the record books, but also make it out in his final fight with a razor-thin majority decision victory.
700 punches right on the dot.
Listen for the bell,
Enjoy
guys.
the rest.
The South Korean Myung-Woo Yeo was already having a historic run in the weight class alongside his fellow countryman Chang Jung-ko. Chong would beat the light flyweight record for the most title defenses at 15. Myung-Woo would tie then overtake Chong's set record with 17 title defenses, which is still a record to this date. Yeo would face Hiroki Ioka in his backyard of Japan in his 18th title defense. Hiroki is the 4-division champion Kazuto Ioka's uncle. In a big upset, Ioka would dethrone the long-reigning champion by split decision. After 2 defenses of the title, Yeo would once again travel to Ioka's backyard of Japan. He will win on the scorecards by a majority decision to recapture the light flyweight title. Yeo would fight one last time against Japanese contender Yuichi Hosono to win by a shutout on the scorecards and retire from boxing with a record of 38-1 and 14 knockouts. He was ranked number 1 by Ring Magazine prior to his retirement. Despite Yeo and Ko undisputedly considered the greatest boxers from South Korea that just happened to share the same weight class together in the same decade, these two were not inducted into the Hall of Fame together, which is a travesty. The two waiting all these years is even more. Chong wasn't recognized till 2010, almost 20 plus years after he had retired and got inducted into the Hall of Fame, and Yeo finally got inducted in 2013. This is a huge problem in the lower weight classes. The amount of disrespect and disregard is disgusting. Imagine putting up a Hall of Fame career to not be recognized because you're not in a glamour weight class. These fighters didn't have a choice. Please keep in mind, Puerto Rican legend Ivan Calderon is still waiting to be inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, not to mention the great Israel Vazquez. As far as region and nationality biases in the ballots, there is a clear weight class bias as well. In the year 2000, Masamori Tokiyama will become the first North Korean world champion, defeating the WBC and lineal super flyweight champ, Injo Cho.
間違いですね。117対109ですよ、最後のポイントはね。新チャンピオン誕生です。徳山正盛。
He would then make 8 defenses of the lineal and WBC title before getting dethroned by his rival Katsushige Kawashima in an absolute shocker, getting stopped in 1 minute and 47 seconds of the first round.
And I wish him all the luck in the world in December, and he will win because he is Ichiban #1.
Masamori would bounce back in an immediate rematch and put on a show to regain the title, defeating Katsushige by a unanimous decision. He will make one last defense of the title and retire from boxing. There was one fighter Masamori wanted to face, and that was newly crowned bantamweight champion Hozumi Hasegawa. He said he will come out of retirement and fight Hozumi. The fight never ended up happening, and Masamori remained retired due to the lack of motivation. But his dream 2 years later in 2008 would come true. Hasegawa versus Tokiyama was on, but it was behind closed doors. Hasegawa was at his physical peak in his career, already made 10 defenses of the title, and Tokiyama hadn't been in the ring for 2 years. This was a hard sparring match, and Tokiyama didn't look like at all he was out of the ring for so long, and looked amazing. This video would go viral upon uploading on YouTube, getting hundreds of thousands of views, which was really unheard of with boxing videos on the platform, especially the two fighters most who viewing this video right now don't know of. Masamori will go on as one of the greatest super flyweights, but he's still waiting for his time to be inducted in the Hall of Fame. This is more of a partial winning and sad at the same time. Rocky had a great run. After his final defense as the heavyweight champion against Archie Moore, Marciano was forced to retire from boxing due to a back injury.
I would like to announce my retirement from boxing at this time.
The longer Rocky remained retired, the more his legend grew. Rocky flirted with the idea of coming out of retirement.
And this is when I got the urge to come back. I'd only been retired 3 years at the time. I wasn't too far out of good condition, so I went away to a training camp close to my home by myself and tried to get myself in condition again as I once did, but I just couldn't. And so I thought it best not to have any publicity on it, but just to go home and call it another day.
After all that, Marciano decided to stay retired. Steve Collins had a hell of a career, defeating Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank not once but twice, and retired from the sport after 7 successful title defenses with a record of 36-3 and 21 knockouts. When I think of the history of the super middleweight division, they had a Three Kings era in the 90s. That made the division what it is today. Eubank, Benn, and Collins, and none of these guys are in the Boxing Hall of Fame. Whose jimmies did they rustle to be blackballed for so long? That's some Pete Rose level of disrespect there. After Klitschko won the hearts of many in his efforts against Lennox Lewis, after years of hate and mistreatment from boxing fans and the media, Vitali would become the WBC champ, defeating Corey Sanders. Unfortunately, Klitschko was forced to retire, not even a year as champion due to an injury. The WBC made Vitali the champion emeritus. Whenever he recovers and wants to come back, he will immediately become the mandatory for the title. When Klitschko became 100% 4 years later, in his first fight back, he fought Sam Peter, who just came off beating James Toney twice, Jamil McClain in a title elimination, and knocked out Oleg Moskayev for the WBC title. Klitschko would dominate Peter, stopping him in the 8th round. Vitali would sweep through the division, making 9 title defenses before retiring from boxing with a record of 45-2 and 41 knockouts. Upon Vitali's immediate retirement, he will return back to his career in politics. He will become the mayor of Ukraine's capital of Kiev and stood with his people during the Ukrainian Revolution just a month after being sworn in office. In 2018, Vitali will be inducted into the Hall of Fame. In 2022, he'll be awarded the Arthur Ashe Award for his efforts in Ukraine. After 21 successful defenses of the strawweight title, which is a record in the weight class, the chances of that being beaten is very low.
The time. He hasn't looked back. What a great uppercut. The time has come here. What a great uppercut, Bobby.
The unified champion will move up to his second weight class and face IBF champion Will Grisby. Lopez then will make 2 title defenses. In 2001, a couple months after his final title defense, he would announce his retirement with a record of 51-0, 38 knockouts, and 1 draw. In 2007, Lopez will be inducted into the Hall of Fame. After Holmes got beat by Mike Tyson in 1988.
That was a right hand, and down goes Holmes from a crashing right hand.
He retired from the sport. He will make a comeback in 91, get back in the ranks, upset the undefeated Ray Mercer to earn a shot to fight undisputed heavyweight champion Evander Holyfield at the age of 42. Holmes would have his moments, but he would come up short against Holyfield. Larry would find himself back in the picture fighting WBC champ Oliver McCall. McCall just coming off a big win beating Lennox Lewis. Holmes once again would come up short of capturing the heavyweight title, losing by a narrow unanimous decision, 115-114, 114-113 by the two judges, razor thin. Holmes will get another shot, this time for the IBO title against undefeated Brian Nielsen in his backyard of Denmark. Many would say Holmes won this fight, and this was some home cooking. Holmes would a lot. Holmes would lose by a split decision to Nielsen after a couple fights against heavyweights from his era, James Smith and Mike Weaver. In 2002, Holmes' retirement fight would be against strongman contest legend Butterbean. Holmes putting on a show, doing what he does best and giving the crowd their money's worth. Holmes will win by unanimous decision, leaving the sport with the record of 69-6 and 44 knockouts. In 2008, Holmes will be inducted into the Hall of Fame.
He has parlayed his 4 rounds, but they have not really done much. There's another.
Butterbean has to reload.
So he's going backwards and taking like the Larry Holmes of old. May I add one's better? Oh, that's the, oh my. Well, it didn't hurt Butterbean.
In 2015, after defeating Manny Pacquiao, Mayweather had a choice: pay the WBO sanction fees and pursue an undisputed unification with Kell Brook, or ditch the belt and explore more options. Since Berto became the WBA interim champ, defeating Josecito Lopez, and this was a fight that Al Heyman was trying to make between the two for many years, a cursed matchup no one asked for and no one wanted, and just the most unexpected events took place preventing this matchup from happening. But now it's actually happening. On paper, it sounds like it'll be a tough fight, but in reality, like the Carlos Baldomir fight, this would go down as one of Floyd's easiest title fights since the Baldomir fight. One judge had it a shutout, and the other two judges, well, gave Berto some participation rounds for his effort, when really this should have been a shutout. Floyd would vacate the belts and retire from the sport.
Floyd, be careful. I got you. Okay. Thank you. All right, baby. Everything good. All right. Yes, sir.
This was really right around the time when Conor McGregor was calling out Floyd. Hype was building up in 2016, but that came to a pause as McGregor lost to Nate Diaz. After McGregor came back, beat Diaz, secured another big win against Eddie Alvarez, the hype train was back for this cross-universe matchup. Both parties fought tooth and nail to get this a 12-round fight. In order for it to be a 12-round fight, there has to be a belt organization to sanction this, and some type of belt on the line. The WBC came swooping in and greatly obliged to sanctioning this fight and coming up with a title specifically for this fight, which would be called the Money Belt. Since that was out the way, and my order could be wrong with this, McGregor's only side of this deal was getting his boxing license and proving to the commission he is capable of fighting 12 rounds. Since McGregor has no credentials in boxing, this is a standard procedure. The ESPN documentary of the Dewey Bozella story highlighted this procedure since Dewey is not in the system. Dewey's test to get this license granted, he had to do 5 minutes on the jump rope, 5 minutes on the heavy bag, 5 minutes on the speed bag, 5 minutes on mid work, and lastly 3 3-minute rounds of sparring. Dewey passed almost every test but came up short in his sparring evaluation, and the commission saw that he was unfit to fight a 4-round fight.
Put me out there with a heavyweight when I'm a cruiserweight. He got me by at least 25 pounds. If you didn't take the advantage away from me, I guarantee it's a whole different fight. I probably would have dropped him. But how can I drop him if you take away my energy? He even said, yo, man, do you want me to fight this man and spar with this man after all the work you did with him? And y'all said, go out there and do it. And that's exactly what I did. It hurts. You taking away my dream. You taking away the only thing I got left.
Dewey would receive proper training from Bernard Hopkins' camp after they had reached out to him, and Dewey passed the test far more convincingly to be granted for his license.
You ready to go?
Give it to me.
You got it, man.
Go! What's up, homie?
It's approved.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what we do.
Sorry, man.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
October 15th. October 15th, baby.
October 15th.
For McGregor, he will have to do a lot more than Dewey to prove that he is capable of going 12 rounds, which he passed and was given a license in the state of Nevada. In boxing history, there's only 22 champions, male and female, to ever retire undefeated. 16 out of that 22 have a perfect clean sheet record, so that means no draws, no contests. Rocky Marciano is the record holder of that at 49-0 across the board. This is the record most have aimed to beating. Most have failed just short of tying it. It's cursed, and Larry Holmes would probably say it's a protected record.
I feel that if a man is going to respond or talk about someone, he should read about him and know about him, and that's all I'm saying.
You're quite happy that Larry Holmes didn't break your brother's record.
Absolutely, without question. I would think that a guy like Larry Holmes would understand that, the Marciano family wanted the record kept intact. It's a record that we're very proud of, and I'm very pleased that things are the way they are.
I'm pretty sure Roger and Floyd Sr. at one point was joking about how sought after and protected this record is. And it will be funny if Floyd beats the record fighting that MMA guy.
The greatest fighter in the world can only come from one zone. The Midwest dominates the world of boxing. I ain't gotta tell you that. Ask them up who got their ass beat by somebody from the Midwest, and then you'll know.
Not only Floyd beat the record, but this fight almost topped off the total pay-per-view sales of his fight with Pacquiao at 5.1 million buys. Outside of the money and the record being beaten, this bridged the gap between boxing fans, the boxing industry, and MMA altogether. The boxing business for the longest was trying to keep MMA out of business and banned in America. And this is a prime example of both industries putting their politics, bad blood, and past behind them and making something happen for the combat sports fans. After this fight, Floyd would happily retire from professional boxing, but he wouldn't retire from what he's best at, boxing and making money, which he's having a fun time doing that. Despite Grant boxing gloves prolonging Joe's career due to his bad hands.
Say as well, thanks to Elvis, these gloves are beautiful, man. Grant gloves, beautiful. Really felt good, man. Protecting my hands good. Cheers, Elvis.
Congratulations, champ. Jim?
That, incidentally, is a reference not to Elvis Presley, but to Elvis Grant, well-known boxing figure who is key executive at Grant Gloves, the gloves that Calzaghe wore to protect his often injured hands during the fight.
After his fight with Bernard Hopkins, he was highly advised to retire from his doctor. He decided to have one last fight. It was not promoted as Joe's last fight against top 5 ranked Roy Jones Jr., more than likely to avoid pressure.
After the Hopkins fight, I knew I was going to have one more fight, and that was it. I couldn't train. I couldn't train anymore. My hands were gone. Scan on my hand, I think it was after Alvarado, and he was telling me my hands deteriorating from all the needles I've had over the years, cortisones and painkillers. He gave me another scan. He said, Joe, seriously, you can't do this for much longer.
It started out rough for Joe as he was knocked down in the first round. He recovered very quickly and made it out of the first, and really started to treat this as his last dance and have fun in the fight, despite HBO not agreeing with his showboating, which is quite ironic. Joe was in the zone and continued on, which is insane, by the way, because Roy was literally trying to knock Joe out in the final half of the fight. I don't know if anyone noticed that, but he was really trying to trap Joe. Joe was able to avoid all of Roy's traps and win by unanimous decision and retire from boxing 46-0 across the board.
He's right now got a record that's unbelievable. He's accomplished everything. Maybe consider his record, maybe one of the greatest fighters of all time when you look at it just as a record. I think he's going to get bigger and bigger each day that he's retired.
After Hasegawa was dethroned by Johnny Gonzalez for the WBC featherweight title, Hasegawa would move down to super bantamweight and make one last run at the title. Hasegawa was the bantamweight champ and had skipped super bantamweight to fight for the WBC featherweight title because there was a lot going on at super bantamweight at that time, and he would have to do a lot of waiting to get that shot. He would move up the ranks of super bantamweight and find himself in a position to face IBF champ Kiko Martinez. Incredibly dirty fight. Hasegawa seemed to be off from a foul, and despite fighting through it, Kiko was able to get the TKO victory. Despite that being promoted as his last chance fight, I don't think he wanted to retire on that note. In most cases, Japanese fighters would retire on that note since it was a title fight. Hasegawa will go for this time one last title run. His run would start off rocky as he had injured his ankle literally days before the fight. He somehow managed to put on one of his best performances against undefeated prospect Horacio Garcia, which really was the fight to put him in position for the title shot. After one more fight as a tune-up, Hasegawa was set up to face hard-punching champion Hugo Ruiz. Hugo just came off a massive win, obliterating Julio Ceja in 51 seconds to capture the title. Japanese and American press had high doubts the old former champ had a chance of beating Ruiz. It was shockingly even, and Hasegawa was looking relatively well. But what most was fearing who followed Hasegawa happened, where Ruiz finally cracked him and hurt him in the second half of the 9th round. Hasegawa found himself on the ropes and Ruiz was about to go for the finish. Hasegawa, knowing this was his last chance in this position to win a title, strategically lets his hands go in a similar fashion what he did against Simone Maludrotu in 2008. And somehow everything Hasegawa threw landed and everything Ruiz threw missed or glanced. Hasegawa won the exchange and backs Ruiz up, who acknowledges Hazumi's heart. That exchange messed up Ruiz's nose and eye. Ruiz was unable to continue due to the damage he took from that barrage, being forced to retire from the fight, making Hasegawa a 3-time 3-division world champion. When Hasegawa won his first world title, he carried his son. When Hasegawa won his final world title, his son was finally old enough to pick him up. Just a wholesome way to end his career off. With a record of 36-5 and 16 knockouts, Hasegawa will happily retire as a champion, where he's still seen quite often in the spotlight, either as a commentator and making numerous appearances on the Japanese TV show Seiyanen, where before they were covering his training camps and his journey throughout his career, to where he's performing challenges against athletes from different walks of life. In response to Devin Haney's tweet stating that Vasyl Lomachenko had a privileged career getting these title shots early. So let's make a video around this topic. But before we get to the list, how does one get in a position to have a title shot so early to begin with? 1, you gotta have credentials, either in the amateurs, which will be a gold medal in the Olympics, or a highly decorated champion from another combat sport. So decorated Muay Thai champs would actually get into a position fighting for a title far quicker than your average non-decorated amateur boxer. 2, you gotta have an ambitious team with capital that 100% believes you have what it takes to become champion out the gate. If your team or management doesn't believe for a second you have what it takes, then you won't be quickly fighting top 20 ranked opponents upon turning pro. 3, you gotta manage to convince a ranked opponent to risk his spot for a title shot to fight you. Now, this is a hard one because why would a ranked opponent want to fight an unranked guy with less than 10 fights on his boxing record? Usually money talks for a decorated boxer. That's maybe a bit hard. History has repeated itself numerous times, and since the average Western boxer doesn't think a Muay Thai fighter is, in today's words, a real boxer, they get duped into thinking this is an easy payday and lose. With all that being said, let's start the video. Yoko, who was originally a baseball player, didn't pick up boxing till his teens. He got good and got good quick, raking in a record of 62 wins, 3 losses, and 50 knockouts in the amateur ranks before turning pro at the age of 18. Yoko's first 8 opponents would mostly be on the level of C-grade sparring partners with barely 15 fights on their resume. After 8 fights, Yoko's management was like, yep, our guy's ready. Yoko's opponent was against 25-1 WBA champion Juan Guzman, who was nicknamed the Little George Foreman. Yoko would prove that he was ready and stop Little George in the 7th round to become the WBA light flyweight champion. He will make 13 defenses of the title before being dethroned. This title defense record in Japanese boxing is infamous as Marciano's record. Whenever Japanese champs start approaching it, Yoko is immediately bombarded about his thoughts if they can beat it. Many have tried, all have failed. He would have retired immediately after being dethroned with a record of 23-1 and 15 knockouts at the prime age of 25. Despite Yoko's early retirement, he remained popular throughout the years, being a part of Japanese pop culture and inspiring the new generation. Almost 40 years after his retirement, Yoko was finally recognized and inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame. I did find it funny, Riddick Bowe's first interaction with Yoko was saying he got hair like me, then followed up with some wholesome interactions on stage.
At age 28, he worked as a matchmaker, arranging bouts 3 nights a week in Mexico's arena. Ray
started boxing very late, at the age of 23. While he was in the military, he learned very fast, winning boxing tournaments. Just barely 4 years practicing boxing, Mercer made the Olympic team and took home gold in the 1988 Olympics. Due to Mercer's gold medal credential proving that he has what it takes, he was quickly given top 50, then top 20 ranked competition, to where he's fighting for the WBO heavyweight title with the record of 15-0. Boxing critics didn't give Mercer the credit he deserved at the time, but was quick to crown and put untested Tommy Morrison above him, claiming that Mercer lacks the experience. Mercer would shut the critics up, stopping Morrison in the 5th round, making a statement. On paper, Nobuo Nashiro had the least impressive amateur record, at 38 wins and 19 losses, but boxing old-timers would say he had a pro-ready style in the amateurs, and Nobuo would make his presence quick at super flyweight. 1 year and 7 fights, Nashiro was ranked number 1 by the WBA, becoming the 30-1 Martin Castillo's mandatory opponent. Martin Castillo was ranked number 1 by Ring Magazine. Nashiro was unranked by them. This fight erupted, becoming a barn burner early, toe-to-toe action from round 2 and out. Castillo would get an awful cut on his eye, and by the 10th round, that the ref, Guillermo Pineda, was forced to wave it off, making Nashiro the WBA super flyweight champion in 8 fights. With Moore's talents and his credentials being part of the tutelage of Emmanuel Stewart's Kronk Gym, Moore was quickly moved to a title shot by his 12th pro bout against number 10 ranked 25-4 Ramzi Hassan. Moore will get the 5th round TKO to become champion. He would then make 9 title defenses before moving up to heavyweight, becoming one of the very few light heavyweight champs to win the heavyweight crown.
And new heavyweight champion of the world.
Despite Ioka coming up short in his amateur career, with a record of 95-10 with 64 knockouts, he was seen as the most talented coming into the pros in Japan. Ioka would already pick up a national title 3 months into turning pro. His next fight, with the record of 6-0, the 35-0 WBC champion, Oledong Sisarmachai. Ioka would shock onlookers, dropping the champion in the second round. Then to get him out of there in the 5th round with a picture-perfect body shot to become the WBC strawweight champion. Not even a year as a champion, Ioka is now unifying against WBA champ Akira Yayagashi in a unification for the books. This fight would be one of the most thrilling fights in the weight class's history, Yayagashi finding a way to fight almost blind in both eyes. Ioka will win by a razor-thin unanimous decision. 2 judges scored it 115-113 and 1 judge had it 115-114. Ioka is still fighting to this date. In 2019, he will become Japan's first 4-division champion. Saha Pram became one of the most decorated Muay Thai champions during the golden age of Muay Thai, which was indefinitely the most dangerous eras of the sport. I cannot find his record, but I'm sure he had well over 100 fights. He beaten the best and got beaten by the best in Muay Thai. After fighting absolutely everyone from his era, Saha Pram retired from Muay Thai and went into boxing. He would pick up the WBC International title, his first pro bout. By his 4th pro bout, he's fighting the 55-5 WBA Bantamweight champion, Daorun Chuwatana. Saha Pram would win by a split decision to become the champion. In Saha Pram's first defense, he would drop tough Ghanaian contender Nana Konandu in the 1st round before Nana came back in the 2nd round, put away Virapol, getting the TKO victory. Barely 2 years and 16 fights later, Saha Pram dethrones Japanese great Joichiro Tatsuyoshi in the 6th round. He would then make 14 successful title defenses with a record of 46-1 before being dethroned in a big upset against Japanese contender Hozumi Hasegawa by a narrow unanimous decision in what would be a classic 12-round banger. The rematch would pick up exactly how the first fight took off, rather even going into the second half. that would come to a sudden end in the 7th round as Sahapram was hit by Hasegawa's signature shot, leveling him to the canvas. And one last run to get his belt back, he became the #1 ranked contender by the WBC, who went up against Vusi Malinga in the final title elimination match, but came up short, getting stopped in the 4th round. Sahapram would retire 2 years later with a record of 66 wins, 4 losses with 46 knockouts. While serving in the United States Marine Corps, Leon Spinks became a well-decorated amateur. To top off his time in the Corps, as well as his amateur boxing career, he will win gold in the '76 Olympics, with the amateur record of 178 wins, 7 losses, and 133 knockouts. Due to Leon's insane amateur credentials, he was quickly moved to be in the position to fight for the undisputed heavyweight title by his 8th pro bout against Muhammad Ali. Spinks, the 10-1 underdog, would shock the world, defeating Ali to become the undisputed champion by split decision. Ali would go on and win the rematch and make history as the first fighter to regain the heavyweight title 3 times. Unfortunately, Spinks was unable to recapture the same magic he did earlier in his career and fell short in his final 2 shots at the world title at heavyweight and cruiserweight. In between all of that, Leon was having numerous fights in Japan and becoming a household name within the wrestling and mixed martial arts industry. 22 wins, 14 losses, and 10 knockouts was his reported record in mixed martial arts. I can only find footage from his wrestling. His MMA fights I can't find, and that's pretty much a piece of lost combat sports media. Back with the video in a short bit. Be sure to hit that like button and help the rest of the good old subscribers be able to view this video. This video's comment question is, what country you're from and who is the best fighter from your country? This can be outside of boxing, so pretty much all of combat sports. If you're from America, who's the best fighter from your state or city? Leave in the comments. Thanks for sticking around, and let's get back to the video. Kosei in his teens was a standout fighter in the amateurs. Despite not coming home with any international titles, he did enough to earn a Japanese B boxing license from the commission. According to AsianBoxing.info, the B license signifies that this fighter is talented. This type of talent signify this fighter is ready to fight tough competition on their pro debut and on, which the 18-year-old Kosei was up against a 12-4 fighter on an 8-fight win streak on his pro debut. He will win by a near shutout. 7 months and 2 fights later, Kosei is fighting the 18-0 Ryuji Hara for the OPBF title. This is a very important regional belt declaring you are the best in the Pacific region, earning contender status. Countries outside of America truly value these regional belts because it's a must-need credential to being in the mix for a title shot. The now 19-year-old would impress many by stopping the undefeated OPBF champ in the 10th round. The 19-year-old with the record of 4-0 is fighting for the WBO title against the 24-1 Julian Yadras in his 5th pro bout, barely 1 year as a pro boxer. Kosei would rise up to the occasion and be a part of history, making it on the small list of teenage world champions in just 5 fights. Tanaka will win by a unanimous decision. Just a year after winning the title, Tanaka would become a 2-division champ in his 8th pro bout against Moise Fuentes at the age of 21. His first defense was against undefeated 16-0 with 16 knockouts, Puerto Rico's Angela Costa. This was a make-or-break fight, as this was a name that Westerners recognized, an undefeated big punching contender under Miguel Cotto's promotional banner. Tanaka would put on a show, beating Acosta by unanimous decision. He would then actually have a tune-up fight, this time in his third weight class, to face his toughest opponent, WBO champ Sho Kimura. Kimura came off a big upset defeating Zhu Shimin for the WBO title, foiling his plans to unify against Kazuto Ioka in his super fight. Then in his next fight, defeating the former WBC ring and lineal flyweight champion Toshiyuki Igarashi in the 9th round. Tanaka fought tooth and nail against Kimura in one of the greatest championship fights in the weight class. He would make history, tying Vasil Lomachenko's record as the fastest to become the 3-division champion, defeating Kimura by a close majority decision. Tanaka didn't stop there. Since he was a WBO super champion at flyweight, he forced Kazuto Ioka to become his immediate mandatory opponent due to those WBO super champ perks. At 15-0, this would be for the history books for the now 25-year-old as the fastest to become a 4-division champion and the second Japanese fighter to ever do it, fighting the first Japanese fighter to ever do it. Despite looking good, in some cases looked to be coming back, Tanaka bit off too much he can chew, and Ioka exploited every bad habit he didn't get fixed due to the obvious and was put out in the 8th round. Due to the politics in the super flyweight division, currently he has to wait it out. Since he's had 4 fights and sitting with the record of 19-1, the record holder as the fastest to become a 4-division champion is Oscar De La Hoya, who did it in 24 fights. So I would say he only got one more shot to make history. Watanabe was a good all-around athlete who was originally a talented swimmer. Yeah, swimmer. Judo picked up boxing, and after 4 amateur fights, he was on that Jake Paul level of confidence and was like, yeah, buddy, I'm ready for the big leagues. Watanabe will rake in 10 wins and 7 knockouts, 4 opponents on their debut, 3 that were winless, and 2 undefeated guys. And Watanabe was like, yep, I'm ready for that title shot. Well, what are you expecting here? Something bad? Nope. He still lost, but this guy came short from becoming the WBC champ. All 3 judges had it 142, 143, 146, 148, and 146, 147. Very, very close. After 1 year and a couple fights later, Jiro got his second crack at the title against WBA champion Rafael Pedroza, who just came off defeating the 53-0 Argentine champion Gustavo Balas by a split decision. Jiro would win by unanimous decision. He would then make 6 defenses of the title. Before setting up what should have been an undisputed unification against WBC champion Payao Puntarat. Colossal Galaxy was Jito's mandatory opponent, and the WBA didn't approve of the Payao unification and stripped Jito of the title before his fight with Payao. Jito would win the WBC title by split decision, rematch Payao, stop him in the 11th round, ending their rivalry. And making 3 defenses before being dethroned by Gilberto Roman. Watanabe will retire right after that fight. As stated many times, the amount of hype for these guys coming to the pros was beyond stupid. The skills from Koki and Daiki matched with their personalities, not only from them, but their father as well. They got the entire country talking. So in comparison here, Devin Haney turns pro at 17 years old, a couple months shy of his 18th, and by his 19th, a fight little over a year, he stepped up in competition fighting for the USBA title, an important national belt signifying you're the best prospect out of America. Koki turned pro at 18. By his 7th pro bout, he's fighting the 46-7 former unified champion, Saman Soldat-Terong. Those who don't know him, he TKO'd Humberto Gonzalez in the 1995 Ring Magazine Fight of the Year. Koki passes his test and puts out Saman in the first round, dropping him 3 times to move forward and fight for the OPBF title, stopping his guy in the 3rd round. By this point, Koki is selling out massive venues, and by the end of the year, he's fighting for the WBA title against Juan Jose Ladeta. Koki wins, but it's controversial. This is discussed in full detail in another video. Watch that if you want more. But he has an immediate rematch 4 months later and wins much more convincingly. Daiki was moved at the exact same pace as his brother. Daiki actually turned pro at 17 years old. By his 8th pro bout, he is fighting 33-0 Vicky Tahumel. By 18 years old, Daiki has cracked the top 15 ranks by the WBC at number 14. Daisuke Naito, after his 3rd fight against the long-reigning WBC and lineal champion Pongseklek Wongjongkam, finally dethroning him. This would set up a massive fight against Kameda, and money, clout, and popularity alone got this 18-year-old in his 11th pro bout a shot of a lifetime to fight for the WBC and lineal title. And guess what? It went absolutely awful, and let the face-off be the perfect foreshadow to this fight. Naito exploits Daiki's experience. Daiki goes in full meltdown mode, somehow avoided a DQ. The crowd completely changed sides and started cheering for Naito. The 12th round being an absolute mess, turning this fight into the worst moment in history of Japanese boxing. Naito wins by a wide margin on the scorecards. Daiki is suspended for a while. His dad is banned for life. Koki faced some disciplinary actions, and the youngest Tomoki just barely avoided any actions himself. And to submit him from receiving such actions, Tomoki was sent off to Mexico to practice and learn boxing there. There really needs to be a documentary on these guys because that was a wild time in boxing. Now, I've done a full video on this guy years back on his amazing story. Check it out if you want more. Sangsek Munserin was a well-decorated Muay Thai champion during the golden era. Like with many Muay Thai fighters from that era, finding records is incredibly difficult. I can only estimate he had well over 100 fights in the pros before going to boxing. Moving to boxing and turning pro, he wanted to fight the best. Sangsek's promotion paid contender Rudy Barrow $20,000 to come to Thailand to face him. Rudy was the WBC mandatory for the junior welterweight title. $20,000 is a lot of money in 1974, especially for a contender fighting a guy who's virtually unknown. Rudy was duped into thinking that this was an easy payday and he will come back America with a lot of money, then to go back out and fight for the world title just some months later. Rudy came into a rude awakening as he gets knocked out cold just 1 minute into the first round. On paper, this should make Mungsering next in line to fight for the WBC title. The WBC wasn't having it and said no one will fight for the world title their second pro bout. Since there wasn't a WBC official present, they had a point as they were already skeptical of the legitimacy of Mungsering's win. Roman G. Velasquez, the president at that time, stated he will be awarded a title shot if he faces a WBC ranked opponent with WBC officials present. Saint-Sac had to face number 3 ranked Leon Furuyama. Leon just came off a razor-thin split decision loss against WBC champion Perico Fernandez in his backyard of Spain. The winner will face Perico. Saint-Sac shocks onlookers and officials, once again stopping the 2-time contender for the first time in his career in the 7th round. Fernandez versus Mungsering is on. Saint-Sac would make history knocking Fernandez out in the 8th round to earn the WBC junior welterweight title, becoming the fastest fighter ever to win the world title in 3 professional bouts. And on top of that, being the heaviest Thai fighter to win a world title. Both records he still holds to this date. Mungsering would lose the title after a disqualification against Miguel Velasquez, knocking him out just after the bell rung. He would regain the title, knocking Vasquez down 4 times before being stopped in the 2nd round. Mungsering successfully defended the title 7 times before being dethroned. Takanori was a baseball prospect in high school, and more than likely he was going to play in the big leagues someday. But after watching a Joichiro Tatsuyoshi fight, he was so inspired that he dropped the gloves and the bat and picked up boxing gloves. Takanori did not train for boxing long. As I stated, he was a baseball prospect. He had absolutely no amateur fights, 0-0, Jake Paul style, and jumped right into the pros after high school. He will make his pro debut at 17 years old. He excelled quickly learning on the job, raking up 15 wins and 13 knockouts. By 20 years old, he became a contender for the WBA super featherweight title within just barely 4 years of boxing. He was matched against number 3 ranked by Ring Magazine, WBA champ Young So Choi. Okay, recap. So this man has no amateur boxing experience, originally a baseball player, has only been boxing for 4 years or less, before getting a title shot against the number 3 guy in the world. So numerous fighters would say Jake Paul is not a boxer. If he is not considered a boxer, then who is this guy? Because on paper, he has far less experience than Paul. Anyways, Hatakeyama will fight Choi to a draw. After defeating undefeated prospect and Japanese national champion Koji Arisawa, the Young So Choi rematch is on. The second time is a charm, and Takanori will become the WBA super featherweight champion with only 5-ish years of boxing experience. He will get dethroned by Mongolian contender Lakfa Sim. At that, Sim would become Mongolia's first world champion. Hatakeyama would move up to lightweight and defeat number 6 ranked Gilberto Serrano for the WBA lightweight title. Takanori's rival in a previous fight was on his way to stopping Gilberto, but due to a bad cut caused by a punch, Serrano ended up getting the TKO victory over Sakamoto.
このベルト、ほら WBA チャンピオン子供たちが作ってくれたチャンピオンベルトなんかこれ見た時にあーってねこう胸が痛んで、俺がチャンピオンベルトをねだから子供たちが作ってくれたんだっていうね。
Since that was Sakamoto's last shot at the world title, and he just came short all due to a cut, Takanori made the honorable decision, if he beats Serrano, to give Sakamoto a title shot. Turning this into Japan's biggest fight to start off the 2000s. In this high-intensity build-up to this prize fight, you saw the early origins of Ismael Salas and Rudy Hernandez. This fight exceeding fans' expectations, Sakamoto fighting like a man with nothing to lose, as this is literally his final shot, and really bringing it to the young champion. Both guys are absolutely battered by the second half. Takanori is a bit on the fresher side, and he was able to pick up the pieces and crack Sakamoto at the end of the 9th round. He was able to get Sakamoto out of there the following round to successfully defend his WBA title. To start off the 2001 year off, there was an American by the name of Rick Yoshimura. His American birth name was Frederick Roberts. Rick fought pretty much his entire career in Japan, and he'll end up becoming Japan's greatest national champion. I would say he has a record that will never get beaten. This man made 22 consecutive title defenses of the Japanese national title. Rick was ranked number 3 by the WBA, and well, why not? Takanori fights Yoshimura to a draw. He would then get dethroned in his next fight against Julian Lorsi, and he will eventually retire from boxing with the record of 24-2 with 19 knockouts and 3 draws. What an amazing career from a guy with no amateur experience. The heavyweight division in America used to be the center of attention. In order to be the best, you must travel to America to make your voice heard. The popularity of the heavyweight division was so massive that it casted this shadow across other weight classes, preventing to gain notice with their talent. America had a massive stable and a political stronghold over heavyweight, as there wasn't really much competition. The only competition really were fighters from Soviet Union and Cuba, but they were not allowed to turn pro and fight professionally, thus plateauing their career as a fighter. When the Soviet Union collapsed and former Soviet republics began to stabilize, as the 90s was a very grim period in Eastern Europe, you began to slowly but surely see talent emerge from these new governed nations. Coming into the 2000s, the amount of talent that America was producing was few and far between to take the throne for the new era, as the 90s era heavyweights were beginning to make their exits out the sport or begin to fade.
A lot of people say the next great heavyweight American is playing in the NFL, that they're going to other sports and stuff. But it's not just because the NFL is there, it's always been there. It's because there's no marketing going on. There's always a football field. How many boxing gyms are there?
Tyson versus Lewis will be the turning point. After defeating America's biggest cash cow, he had vacated all his belts, but the WBC and IBO. He would then face Vitali Klitschko, then retire. HBO's first effort to revitalize the heavyweight division in America, in partnership with Top Rank, signing Mike Tyson to an $80 million deal after his final fight on his Showtime contract. Tyson losing to Danny Williams would make them ditch those efforts. Ukrainian Vitali Klitschko would win the vacant WBC title, but was forced to vacate it and retire just a year in as champ due to a knee injury. American and former heavyweight champion Hasim Rotman will be awarded the title in today's words by email, as he was promoted from interim champion to champion upon Vitali's retirement. American Chris Bird will pick up the vacant IBF title against Evander Holyfield. John Ruiz would defeat Evander Holyfield for the WBA title, then lose it to Roy Jones Jr., then regain it again against Fred Oquendo. He would get dethroned by James Toney, but Toney would test positive for a banned substance. It was then switched to a no contest, and Ruiz will be re-awarded the WBA title. With the European contenders now in line for the titles, the European takeover of the heavyweight division would start on December 2005 and sweep 2006. Ruiz gets dethroned by the Russian giant Nikolai Valuev. Just a couple months later, Vladimir Klitschko defeats IBF champ Chris Bird. Since this is before the WBO is made a legitimate title and recognized by all belt organizations. Very strangely, out of all of this, Vladimir was removed from the WBO ranks, though he had defeated Sam Peter in a title elimination bout. That wouldn't matter anyway, as Belarusian Sergey Liakovich defeats WBO champ Lamont Brewster. By summer 2006, there was only one American belt holder, Hasim Rotman, and he was up against Uzbek Kazakh national, but newly nationalized to Russia, Oleg Moskaev. Moskaev defeats Rotman, stopping him in the 12th and final round.
Where have you gone, Joe Louis? A lonely boxing nation turns its eyes to you.
All 4 heavyweight title belts belong to fighters born and raised in former Soviet republics. So if the heavyweight division is dying in America, it is alive and well in Eastern Europe.
To complete the takeover, Vladimir Klitschko travels to Madison Square Garden to face contender and US hopeful, the 29-0 Calvin Brock in November of 2006. Klitschko stops Brock in the 7th round to retain his titles.
And Wayne Kelly's going to stop it. A knockout win for Klitschko.
Liakovic will get dethroned by American Shannon Briggs in one of the greatest finishes to end the era in American heavyweight boxing. Briggs' reign would come short and he would lose the title against Sultan Ibragimov. By 2007, all the power politically rests in Europe, to where you see more Americans traveling overseas to fight for the title or make a name of themselves. These nations' TV networks, advertisers, and investors have been waiting many years to have a heavyweight title fight in their backyard, as they were blocked from having such privileges, which you can tell from the production for these events. Now they have that power, and from what it looks like with the heavyweight picture, it's going to be like that for a long while.
David Hay is gonna be my 50th knockout. Das ist meine 50. Knockout am 2. Juli.
Boy, this is going to be an exciting fight. Are you ready?
Absolutely. I go and take my brother.
So this is most suiting to have these back to back. However you want to look at it, Don King's influence and the fights he made helped carve up some of the most iconic events in boxing history.
Don King put this together. It was not a color put it together. You understand? I'd like to call him the Messiah.
What led to King's downfall was his shady business practices and taking advantage of the financially illiterate. Though King did claim he provided services to fighters to help them become more financially literate, invest their money in the right places, given how history is with fighters outside of King's stable and how they refuse to learn such vital skills, where their earnings are drained before retirement, you can only put but so much blame on the promotion or the promoter. You can only teach someone who is willing to be taught. I think a prime example of a fighter from an incredibly volatile era of fight purses who became financially literate and kept pretty much everything is Larry Holmes. The 30 for 30 doc shows a young Larry building his dream house before his biggest fight against Muhammad Ali. Then fast forward to present day, Larry is still in that very same house he built. Larry is the ideal fighter to learn from when it comes to having flash and moderation, learning the trade and not getting stuck in the game. With that being said, Don had way too much invested in the heavyweight division, so much to where it seemed like whenever a prospect or a champ from the lower weight class lost, he sat them on the shelves to collect dust, or low budget, ill promoted matches. You have the undisputed welterweight champion fighting on an undercard, then to fight in a relatively small venue in New York. Guys like O'Neal Bell, Luis Collazo, Joseph Abeco, Travis Sims, the list goes on for champs who lost and just vanished. Don had a chance to sign the Klitschkos in the late 90s, but due to his fakery, the Klitschkos didn't fall for any of these tricks and passed up on his deal. With the heavyweight division and America's influence falling apart in the mid-2000s, these powers going to Europe, King had no stable to fall up on, and fighters who were signed were quickly trying to get out of their contracts as King's deals with TV networks were beginning to wither away, as Showtime, who Don King was with, was beginning to shift their attention to the lower weight classes.
How do you promote and unify this thing? Because for 11 rounds and 2 minutes and 30 seconds, this was not a fight that was worthy of a heavyweight championship title.
That's your opinion.
Well, it's the opinion I think of everybody who was watching as well.
And that opinion would have had some validity to it had it not been the knockout. But since there was a knockout, who's to say that Shannon wasn't planning it all the way?
To pinpoint when exactly the arrow is officially changing the hands of power and the influence will no longer have a push will be on June 2nd, 2007. The last of the US heavyweight title holders, Shannon Briggs, who is promoted by Don King against Sultan Ibragimov. Sultan beats Briggs for the WBO heavyweight title, and in this European article, it brilliantly states that the monopoly returns back to Europe. Donald Curry will go down as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, amateur boxer to not win a gold medal, with a record of 400 wins and 4 losses. He was not allowed to compete in the Moscow Olympic Games due to the United States protests of the USSR putting boots in Afghanistan. By the time Curry got into title contention, Sugar Ray Leonard announced his retirement and Thomas Hearns was campaigning at junior middleweight. Curry would pick up Leonard's vacant WBA title against Korea's Jun Suk Hwang. He will then unify against IBF champion Marlon Starling. A year and a couple defenses later, Curry is now unifying against Milton McRoy. It's 1986, Marvin Hagler is on top after defeating Thomas Hearns. Sugar Ray Leonard is supposedly retired for good. Roberto Duran is at the bottom, rebuilding his career. Outside of what's happening at heavyweight, Donald Curry is on the cusp of being one of the faces in the sport due to his dominance of the welterweight division. All of that would come to a halt when the WBC mandatory and 5-1 underdog Lloyd Honeyghan pulled off the upset, defeating Curry. So there was some drama leading up to here. When Curry was the undisputed champ, he asked Ray Leonard and his management for an advice if he should move up to face Marvin Hagler. They told him no. Then fairly shortly after that advice was made, Leonard comes out of retirement to face Marvin Hagler. Curry then tried suing Leonard for $1 million in financial damages. In Curry's campaign at junior middleweight for the WBA title against Mike McCallum, Curry wanted Leonard removed from the broadcast team for this fight due to their beef. Up on all judges' scorecards coming into the 5th round, McCallum would finally have Curry locked in for the perfect punch, laying Curry out. As this was still possibly a pending lawsuit against Leonard, the commentator Barry Tompkins tells Leonard on the broadcast, "You settled a case out of court here." This was named Ring Magazine Knockout of the Year. This would completely end what would come up of the Curry era and ironically start the new era of the long-reigning champ Mike McCallum. After Manny Pacquiao's loss to Floyd Mayweather, the Manny train continued to pull, defeating Tim Bradley in their 3rd fight for the WBO International title, then to defeat WBO champion Jesse Vargas. Manny would then lose the title against Jeff Horn. Due to the media backlash at the time of the results, Manny had one last go on top. He would face newly crowned WBA regular champion Lucas Matisse. Manny would look impressive against Lucas and gain the WBA regular title. Please keep in mind, Keith Thurman is a true WBA welterweight champion as he holds the super title. The Lucas fight was under Manny's boxing promotion, with Manny already not in the best relations when his contract came to an end in December of 2016. When it came to his fight with Lucas Matisse, ESPN Plus, which is under Top Rank, supposedly got the rights to air the fight in the States. Not only Top Rank, but a few other parties failed to pay Manny the rights to air the fight. So pretty much they illegally streamed the fight in HD for hundreds and thousands of people while they raked in subscription sales. Manny sued them for not making their payment, and for future MP promotion fights, he will restrict them from getting the opportunity to buy the rights till the payment is made. I cannot find any sort of updates, so I'm assuming it was settled out of court, but these relations are definitely severed as Manny would sign to PBC Al Heyman and also take his promotion and stable of fighters with him. Those notable fighters being Isaac Pitbull Cruz, Mark Musayo, and John Ray Casimero. Manny's first fight under the PBC Showtime banner, he fought Adrian Broner. He would outclass and outshine Broner to a unanimous decision. This would set up the fight against the real WBA champion, Keith Thurman. This will be the fight to either, depending what happens, end the Pacquiao era or keep on chugging as Manny is now 40 years of age. Manny would turn back the clock and get the split decision victory over Thurman to set up what would be a super fight against Errol Spence Jr. With Spence's car accident and the pandemic happening, this really messed up setting up this fight. By the time it was set up, Pacquiao was already made champion in recess and mandatory challenger Eubank Jr was promoted to champion. To avoid a Graciano-Rosiciani situation, which Ugas would have every right to bring the WBA to court over and win by a landslide, using the Graciano versus WBC case as an example, the WBA made the wise decision of revoking Manny's request to restore him as the champion, making it a unification against Spence Jr. Just 10 days before the fight, Spence was forced to withdraw due to a torn retina. Ugas was already in camp, came in as Spence's replacement, replacement. The winner fights Errol Spence, and well, you know, the winner of that will go on to fight Crawford for the undisputed title. Manny would come up short and lose by unanimous decision. He would immediately announce his retirement and announce he would be running for president. The era of the Golden Boy came crushing down abruptly, with HBO at doubts who would hold the torch. After Oscar's mega fight with Floyd Mayweather, he was preparing for the rematch. He had a tune-up fight against Steve Forbes, with Mayweather Sr. back at the helm as head coach.
Do I want my son knocked out? No. Do I want his ass whooped? Hell yes. He needs it.
This was also Oscar's first non-pay-per-view fight, and it was held in an outside venue. Due to the immediate success of HBO 24/7, since this was an Oscar fight, the HBO Countdown series will receive the 24/7 production treatment.
I'm not the greatest at this time, that time, poor time, part time, but of all time.
This is the story of a boxing legend seeking a storybook ending,
with one of the best ending montages that no one saw. At the catchweight of 150, Oscar will put up an impressive performance against Forbes, getting the unanimous decision. The HBO team was quite confident that the Mayweather rematch is a done deal for September.
The outcome mean to that possible fight?
The fight looks like it's virtually a done deal.
I can guarantee you one thing right now. I will beat him. I will.
Will you guarantee when you're going to fight him?
Well, the date is not set in stone yet. There's nothing signed, but with Floyd Sr. in my corner, I will get him.
Little they knew, Floyd's bluff for retirement was real, and there was a scramble to get a replacement. The replacement will be newly crowned WBC lightweight champion Manny Pacquiao. Manny had shown incredible prospects in his first fight at lightweight against David Diaz. With Manny's growing star power and large hardcore Filipino fan base, he was the best option for a big fight replacement. This was met with scrutiny on Oscar's end, as this was seen as a mismatch against the pound-for-pound star. The Filipino government tried to get Manny's license revoked, blocking Manny from fighting De La Hoya. This ultimately failed, and Manny continued on his journey to welterweight, to later shock every boxing analyst. Manny would one-sidedly beat Oscar, shaking up the boxing world. Oscar would immediately retire from the sport and focus on his promotional company. In 2003, Roy Jones was on the top of the world, making history, gaining the WBA heavyweight title against John Ruiz, then to move back down to light heavyweight to defend his light heavyweight title against Antonio Tarver. Jones would get the majority decision win, and this would open up for a rematch. He would then get thrown by Tarver in the second round. This era would come to an official end when Jones faced Glenn Johnson just 4 months later for the IBF title. Down on the scorecards, Jones would get knocked out again in the 9th round. Roy would bounce back up and down in the ranks over the years. After a 4+ year win streak, after his loss against Denis Lebedev in 2011, by September 2015, Roy Jones is ranked number 11 by the WBO. If he were to get past Enzo Maccarinelli, he just may had cracked the top 10 WBO ranks coming into the 2016 year, and be granted a gift retirement title fight against the champ Glowacki. Jones would unfortunately lose against Enzo, and that shot would go to Steve Cunningham.
So this is being built in London, actually, right, where we found
everything seems to be in Europe and not in the U.S.
Yeah,
Gary, it saves on the shipping. If it stays in Europe, it's going to stay in Europe, isn't it? I mean,
not a chance.
From the 90s to the mid-2010s, the political power in the super middleweight division was dominated by Europe. Up until the Super 6 tournament, the biggest, most significant fights were made there. Once the tournament ended, it was right back to Europe.
For a fighter to go on air and say something like that is putting not only Ken in a very difficult spot, but the rest of the promoters, because it's almost as if their team's not doing the job they should be doing.
I get to be at home for my 3 fights, and it's a big advantage for me. My phone was lit up after that. Something he should have just kept his mouth shut about.
The shift of power slowly started back in 2017. Badou Jack, a Gambian Swede who predominantly fights in America, was unifying against James DeGale. This would end up in a draw. Jack would move up to light heavyweight. James would get dethroned by Caleb Truax. DeGale would regain the title, but he would shortly vacate it. American Caleb Plant will pick up the belt. The WBC title, it should have went to Callum Smith, as he was the #1 ranked fighter and silver champion. The vacant belt should have been fought between him and Eric Skoglund, but instead it was for the WBC Diamond Belt. Benavidez, who was #4, was given the rare privileged opportunity of fighting for the vacant WBC title against #9 ranked Ronald Gavril. Now, from June 2017 to August, Gavril would magically move up in the ranks to #6. Benavidez beat Gavril to become champion. Callum Smith would win the super middleweight tournament and become the ring and unified champion. Now the division really is in a political split. IBF and WBC is residing in North America within the PBC Showtime networks. WBO and WBA is in Europe within Eddie Hearn and DAZN coming into 2020. That would come to a change when Canelo fully started his campaign at super middleweight. Canelo first went after Callum Smith. Due to Benavidez not making weight in his previous fight prior to the makings of Canelo Smith, the vacant WBC title will be fought between them. Canelo beats Smith and gets the WBC, WBA, and ring titles. He will then go after Saunders for the WBO. Then all what's left is the IBF. Canelo crosses over to Showtime PBC and beats Caleb Plant for the title, making it so that the biggest money fights and the political power is now back in North America, something that has not been seen since Sugar Ray Leonard's brief stay in the weight class before heading to Europe. With Canelo in power, right at the door, David Benavidez, Caleb Plant, Christian Mabili, and David Morrell. The Three Kings era defined 80s and American pop culture. The era would slowly come to an end when Marvin Hagler retired from boxing immediately after his defeat against Leonard. For Leonard, it would be after his fight against WBC champ Terry Norris. Leonard's influence and power was so large that he was able to get a shot at the title at junior middleweight out of retirement, despite his last championship fight, which was almost 3 years prior, was at super middleweight. Leonard would lose lopsidedly on the scorecards to Terry Norris and go back into retirement. Duran rebuilds, loses to Vinny Pazienza, which was highly competitive to where it spawned a rematch, loses again, defeats undefeated prospect Ronnie Martinez, loses to Hector Camacho, have a 2-fight rivalry against Jorge Castro with Duran coming up victorious. Duran will get the retirement title shot package to fight newly crowned WBA middleweight champion William Joppy. Joppy makes short work of Duran, stopping him in the 3rd round. For Thomas Hearns, Hearns would dethrone the undefeated long-reigning champ Virgil Hill for the WBA light heavyweight title.
Thomas Hitman Hearns. I want to say hello to my grandfather. He's 108 years old. Grandpa, we get it again, baby.
In his first defense, he would lose the title in his rematch against Aaron Barkley by a razor-thin split decision. Now, you can say this fully ended the era, but Hearns kept on going. He moved up to cruiserweight, which he was actually looking good winning regional belts. But the problem was he did not fight outside of that regional realm, peaking at #5 in the Ring Magazine rankings in 1993. Due to not stepping up, he was delisted from the rankings.
What we have scheduled is for Tommy the Hitman Hearns to go again on February the 19th in Charlotte. We're going to try to put Bobby Ches in with Wamba. If we can get Bobby Ches and Wamba, the winner of that will be fighting Tommy Hearns. So it's coming right in the progression, and maybe by April or May, he'll be the cruiserweight champion of the world.
Too little too soon, Hearns would find himself in the UK fighting for the IBO title against Nate Miller. Hearns would earn the unanimous decision and pick up his last world title. In 2000, Hearns would get dethroned by Uriah Grant due to a knee injury, and he would retire from the sport, putting a full end to the Three Kings. When Chavez received his first, moving him entirely as a clean sheet record holder, Chavez had a new goal of trying to become the first fighter to have 100 fights with no loss. So Chavez would have several fights in the same year in between his mandatory title defenses. If he were to get past mandatory opponent Frankie Randall, Chavez would have most certainly met his goal by the end of 1994 and retired from boxing. He lost to Randall, foiling his plans. He would beat Randall in the rematch, but he fought way less his usual average, but still fighting at the top of the sport. In 96, Chavez would get dethroned by De La Hoya. He was stopped on cuts, so Chavez still remained at top. The Chavez era would officially come to an end, losing to De La Hoya in the rematch. The influence was still very strong during Ali's retirement after defeating Leon Spinks in the rematch. Larry Holmes was not the original opponent to face Ali. It was supposed to have been against WBA champion John Tate. Tate would lose the setup fight against Mike Weaver in the final round, and the rest was history. Ali, by this point, had to select to fight his former sparring partner and WBC champion Larry Holmes.
One more.
Ali was not the same fighter he was 2 years prior, and what really didn't help at all, he pretty much ruined any chances he would have against Holmes by taking thyroid medication to lose weight, doubling the amount of dosage, causing some serious damage to his system to where he had little to no energy to fight. This fight would be unfortunately dragged out for 10 rounds due to the incompetent ref, and it would be finally waved off in the 10th round after Dundee literally screaming at the ref to stop the fight.
He said that's lost. He handled it with dignity.
And the Angelo wants to stop the fight. And they all have bargained with it.
Angelo Dundee wants to stop the fight. That's it.
Darnell Boone is like the MF Doom of boxing. He's low-key your favorite boxer's favorite boxer. He's one of the hardest working guys in the industry. This man delivers, and that's why he kept on getting quality fight after fight. 3 years and some change, this man had 22 fights. 2/3 of that 22 were against blue chip prospects. Andre Ward, Enrique Anelius, Lahan Simon, John Pascal, Curtis Stevens, Jesus Gonzalez, and Brian Vera. Boone would take a short break in 2007 and come back in 2009, and this man went to work, fighting Craig McGuinn 1 month later, Erislan De Lara 2 months later, Edwin Rodriguez. A couple months later, Brandon Gonzalez. Then 25 days later, knocks out Adonis Stevenson. A win, but officially a draw against Lennox Allen, then the controversial loss against Sergey Kovalev. This man's 2009 and 2010 schedule was insane. Boxing has many roles. Boone knew his duty and he excelled. His duty was to test blue chip prospects to see that they have what it takes to move up to the world stage. There really should be a special place in the Hall of Fame for these type of fighters. They're the unsung heroes of the sport. They're the backbone of boxing when it comes to creating world champions. The personality, the humble beginnings, and what Hagler had to do to be finally accepted by the mainstream media gained the respect by many. While other fighters didn't have to do much to get the limelight, Hagler had to do double, if not triple, to get where he is in the sport. To where he's on late night shows, Saturday Night Live when it was good.
And finally, when you ask where you are, say Las Vegas, and you'll probably be right.
Big commercials, and even international movies.
Says we're gonna crash it. What am I, an idiot? Is this the same guy that we rescued from Jack Benet some time ago?
Keep in mind, this was during a time when being bald wasn't popular from a big corporate marketing perspective.
Speaking of your head, how often do you...
Don't start like Johnny Costa now. Where do your forehead ends?
No. But how often do you shave your head?
Wait a minute, I gotta make sure you got all yours too.
So this is really a hell of an achievement to be part of. One of the many centerpieces of American pop culture.
Deplorable. I'm speaking of offending in the personal grooming arena. Something I would of course consider quite beyond the pale. So I give you a new Red Guard sports stick, antiperspirant and deodorant.
Marvin is the perfect example of being a boogeyman, but also having the perfect balance of flash and charisma that wins the hearts of many fans.
This is it all with you?
I don't believe so. You know, I got power on both hands, you know. One is K, the other one's O.
Yeah.
You know, this one don't get you, that one will.
I wish you guys wouldn't go out to dinner together, and even though you're going to fight or something like that.
They told me you're making $21 million. After I finish with him, I might come after you.
Over the years, there's been many boogeyman figures in the sport, but they lack both categories that would have elevated them in and out of the sport of boxing. To be honest, I never heard a single bad thing about this guy. He's low-key been in boxing for many years and didn't really get into the spotlight till the 2010s. I personally worked on a couple projects with Tom. I can say he's a classy dude. My opinion, Tom plays a very massive role in bringing light to the lower weight classes on a mainstream level. Tom acquired in a joint partnership with Tate Promotions the undefeated Roman Gonzalez right at the peak of his career after Floyd's retirement, putting Roman at #1 in the pound-for-pound rankings. All eyes were on Gennady Golovkin, who Tom promoted. Tom took a couple pages from the 90s when Chavez was fighting. Chavez had Ricardo Lopez fighting on his undercards. Since this was the golden age in the lower weight classes, with the right promotional push, it'll be a hit, and it sure was.
Chocolatito's not an American. This is where the audience is. Can he do the same thing for the lower weight classes that Carvajal did?
He does some spectacular things, so much of a reminder of the great late Alexis Aguero.
Gonzalez would put up an amazing HBO debut as a co-main to Golovkin Monroe.
Anyone care that they're flyweights? Not at all. That's some heavyweight action right there.
100%. That's the way to fight. Any questions, American boxing audience?
Roman's popularity will quickly gain to where Roman would have a card of his own, complemented with fighters from the lower weight classes, getting the spotlight of their own in the undercard. This would attract world-class 2-division champion Naoya Inoue. He will make his US and HBO debut on Tom's Superfly event. Due to the major success, this motivated the then-retired 3-division champion Kazuto Ioka to come out of retirement. He would also fight on Tom's Superfly 2 card.
Superfly 2をロサンゼルスで見た時に、その気持ちがここで戦いたいという気持ちがまた生まれてきて、新たに挑戦したいと思いますし、またアメリカのボクシング会場雰囲気
Afterwards, Ioka will put up a Hall of Fame caliber career, becoming Japan's first 4-division champion. Due to the hidden gems Tom unearthed on the mainstream stage, this helped set up the bantamweight tournament on a far larger level than the original one back in the early 2010s. This would become a massive success, turning Inoue into a huge star on the world level, becoming boxing's first fighter to be on the cover of Ring magazine. This would also revive the career of Nonito Donaire, who was after the Frampton fight at the end of the road. Due to Tom's risk, he was able to make the lower weight classes highly lucrative, and he must get big props for this because he started it all. I made a video on this man some years back called The Hardest Working Man in Boxing. Buck Smith is the definition of a full-time boxer. Not seasonal, not part-time, full-time. Buck started out as a boxing spectator. One of the fighters was a no-show, and the promoter got desperate and started offering spectators money to fill in for the no-show. Buck accepted it. Despite losing, this would forever change his life. Buck fought at the most ridiculous pace. He felt like the most physical damage takes place during sparring, so instead of risking getting injured in exchange for experience, which he doesn't really get paid for, he fought guys on an almost day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis who were the equivalent to a sparring partner.
I've been fighting sparring partners. Well, it was a sparring session, but for you, not for him. Sean Gibbons, this has to be very rewarding for you guys. You run around the country in your Honda Civic, right? Right. All right. And taking these fights in small towns, this is a good moment for Buck.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's taken us, 2 years and 200,000 miles later to get back to Vegas.
This man will drive venue to venue all over the Midwest, raking up hundreds and thousands of miles annually on his Honda Civic. In 1989, the 22-1 Buck will lose his second fight against Olympic gold medalist Robert Wungila, who was 3-0 at the time. It's almost like this man went to the hyperbolic time chamber and gained 8 years experience in 2 years, because Buck would rake in 70 fights in 2 years to earn a rematch against Robert.
The first time I fought him, I was a little bit unexperienced at the time because I had him hurt and had him down in the second round. Couldn't put him away. Couldn't follow up with anything. But this time, I believe I can follow up with everything that I throw at him now and keep him down for good.
The now more polished and experienced Buck would beat Wungila, stopping him in the second round.
Good hook by Buck Smith.
And another, and Wangila's in big trouble, and down he goes, out of the ring, somersault.
This fight will be over. Well, he stopped it, not
That's it. Well stopped, well stopped. Well stopped.
it was a lot sharper and a lot crisper this time than it was that wide wing and hook that I fought him 2 years ago.
And you said that's what you've been working on. Is that the way you've been throwing that punch?
Yes. For the last 2 years, I've been practicing on sharpening up and making it connect, hit the right spot.
With a record of 124-2, Buck made the IBF top 5 ranks. He would more than likely be in line for a title shot if he got past Kevin Pompey for the IBF USBA title, which is an important regional belt. Smith will come up just short and lose to Pompey. This will be the closest Smith came to a title contention.
Clearly in command on your card. I don't think you can argue with that. Buck Smith mocking Pompey, but Pompey at the same time.
Wow!
Good right hand.
Oh my!
And that really hurt Pompey. And now this is the one moment for Buck Smith. He's got to do it all right here.
This is it. It's all on the line right here because he won't win a decision unless he knocks Pompey out.
And he's letting Pompey catch a breath here.
Give Pompey credit though. I mean, he was out on his feet. He is now.
He will continue to fight on regularly. He will finish up his career with a record of 183 wins, 20 losses, with 124 knockouts. Leroy Neiman is one of the most famous artists to contribute to the sport of boxing. His style is rather unique. He's an expressionist artist. He has painted a piece for almost every historic fight in boxing from the 60s onward to the 2000s. A lot of times he will be part of the creation of the official poster for the fight. For the people who always wondered who was that guy with the unique mustache and a background at big fights and even in boxing movies, that's him. Artwork was used for the Rocky movies, as Leroy's original pieces go for a lot of money. This piece he made in 1969 of the great Sugar Ray Robinson is going for $42,000. Leroy's influence will live on in boxing for future painters. Now, some may have negative views based on a fan's perspective. Fabella is a fighter's first promoter. He looks out for what is best for the fighters and not for himself.
That a young champion has the right to be protected by an organization and not made to fight the best fighter in his division or in the world, who has, by the way, paid sanctioning fees to the WBC throughout his career, been loyal to the WBC, expect the WBC to do the right thing as it usually does. This man is your champion. This is the best middleweight in the world, and no one understands and no one in the world thinks otherwise.
Lusa, can you please sit down? No, we will not accept you to speak anymore. Please sit down.
If not for him, we as fans would have never been able to see the full potential of the great Sergio Martinez. As Martinez was being treated wrong by the WBC, Lou fought the hardest for Sergio to get what he's entitled to.
Unless both parties reach an agreement, raise your hand, please.
They do favors and favors and favors for the people that have Pacquiao and Mayweather. And Sergio, the best middleweight in the world, is an afterthought. And it shows you how uneven the playing field is and how television often can be part of the problem.
I think when it came to the case of Germaine Taylor, we saw Lou's true colors here. He really did his best to put Germaine on the right path to glory. When Taylor hit rock bottom in his career, Lou was right there by his side, trying to give him every opportunity to keep him afloat, as well as trying to provide him with the help he desperately needs for his mental health, as Taylor was never the same after his loss against Arthur Abraham. Lou could have very well cut ties with Germaine after 2015, when the Morrison fight got canceled due to Germaine's legal troubles, but he still remained by his side. Now, I'm not going to share the fighter's name, but I did receive a fighter's experience with Lou, who had an up and down career and hasn't gotten a fair shake on the business end by people above the promotion. He told me, just as I assumed, he was an advocate for the well-being of the fighter's mental health. He's a straightforward, no BS guy that's not going to lead you on. He's willing to let you move up at your own pace, and when you're ready to step it up and to be thrown into the mix and make rank, he's more than willing to give his support. From what I've seen, if you don't take what you have been matched with, you'll get thrown on the shelf to collect dust. Seen it with veterans and even well-talented prospects. As far as promotions go, Lou is like the equivalent to the IBF. Straightforward, no BS, and those who are really hungry and want it will be rewarded indiscriminately. Neil Leifer is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, photographer not only in boxing but American sports history. Some of the most beautiful photography from various sports at the highest level of the game. He has captured almost every iconic boxing moment, beautiful boxing portraits from the 1960s when he took as a teenager all the way to the 2000s. When it comes to vintage boxing color photography, the one thing that stands out from his is the color and clarity. Very fine grain, which is almost non-existent, to where it looks like a modern day photo, beautifully preserved for newer generations to appreciate. I believe in these images, Neil was using his go-to camera, the Yashica Mat, which is a medium format film camera. It uses 56 by 56 millimeter film, far larger than your standard 35 millimeter. You have much more light and information coming through to where it will produce a fine image, like this one here, where you can zoom in so far that you can see a young Larry Merchant in the background and absolute awe of what's happening, compared to using 35mm film, which you're guaranteed to have medium to heavy grain because the lighting situation for these fights is not the best. Reasons why flash photography was so prevalent and acted in some cases as a fill light. Flash photography would be banned in boxing because, well, the obvious. I can't pinpoint the year it was banned, but it would had to been in the late 60s or so in certain states, but later nationwide years later. Neil is now 80 years old. The last fight that I can find that he shot was Wilder Fury 2 in 2020. After being called a quitter and being told to retire from boxing by the press, Klitschko was considering retirement. It wasn't until both brothers received a letter from the former heavyweight champion Max Schmeling, giving the brothers words of encouragement. Those words fueled them. Vitali would leave everything on the line, including his eye against Lennox Lewis, earning the respect from many. After winning the WBC title, he was forced to retire due to an injury. After fully healing, Klitschko would come back and put on a Hall of Fame career, regaining the title in his first fight in over 4 years. He will make 9 title defenses before retiring from the sport to pursue politics. During the Ukrainian Revolution, Klitschko is standing with his people during the worst moments of the protests. Vitali would run for presidency, but he would change his mind and decide to run for mayor of Kiev. He would win and be sworn in later in 2014, where he's still mayor to this day. Vitali's efforts over the years and in current days of what's happening in Ukraine, with him being a massive political target as the mayor of Ukraine's capital. Klitschko did not flee and seek asylum. He remained with his people to defend his homeland. Klitschko would be awarded the Arthur Ashe Award for his bravery in 2022. Peter Buckley will be billed the worst boxer of all time by the media, which for me, I can't say that. I would say he's one of the hardest working boxers in the industry. Peter treated boxing as a full-time job. He understood his role as a fighter of his caliber. He did not overstep his boundaries and went on to be the best, most reliable guy out there. A guy a promoter can always rely on to test their young and upcoming fighters and give them the rounds they need to gain precious experience in the sport, as those fighters who faced him gave Peter the same level of respect to where they were fighting with the intentions of getting rounds in and practicing their craft. Perfect example, Peter went a full 6 rounds to a decision against Prince Nassim Hamed in 1992. Out of 256 losses, Peter was only stopped 10 times. As this is Peter's job to give fighters rounds and test them, in quite a bit of cases he did get robbed.
Look at him, look how he boxes, look how he boxes, look how he looks after himself. Look at his face, he's not banged about, he looks very, very well. He's a very, very good professional.
Peter would be awarded for his 200th fight, but his real goal was to hit 300 fights. Peter had faced them all. Despite getting of age, he was determined to get to 300 fights on his resume. He got to 299 fights by October 2008, losing to a 6-round decision to the future champion Lee Selby. For Peter's 300th fight, which will be billed as his final fight, a large crowd will be in attendance as he's facing Martin Muhammad.
Standing ovation, everybody in the arena, including promoter Frank Warren.
Peter would end his career with a 4-round decision win, with the many that attended making this moment very special.
The last hurrah for Peter Buckley in the red trunks, and he lands with another left hook, and he's being cheered here as if he was in a world title fight, I tell you. He has won it, he has done it. Number 300 is a win.
It felt great just to win in front of them, it's great as a winner. Hopefully I'm going to stay in the game and put what knowledge I've got to train people. So anyone listening, it's a job in training.
Emanuel Stewart is most famously known for training the great Thomas Hearns, making Lennox Lewis and Vladimir Klitschko into a Hall of Fame heavyweight, bringing in Tyson Fury, and creating an insane amount of champions throughout his life as a trainer. Stewart was a fan favorite, as he did not play into whatever narrative that the network was trying to push. He told things as it is, giving his honest observation. His opinion and predictions in boxing as a whole were on the level of Nostradamus. When he talked, people would be quiet and listen. His knowledge of not only the sport, the business, and the history was amazing to behold. Stewart will forever be cemented in boxing, and his services in the community, keeping hundreds if not thousands of young delinquents off the streets in Detroit, teaching them the discipline of boxing.
I never had any plans at all of being a big boxing manager or trainer. Most of my time was consumed with my career at Detroit Edison, and worked as a lineman about 9 years. I was always still going to the gym in the evening as a hobby though, training my little boxers. Good.
He left us too soon when boxing needed his voice the most, and he will forever be missed.
What's your thinking about all this?
Well, I think what we saw and heard is what we have. Sounded like Larry Mercer talking slow. But I really think that his son is the apple of this man's eye, and he loves his son. Such love I've never saw from a father. And I think sometimes his loves and emotions just end up with uncontrollable outbursts verbally, and that's just the way he is.
Gotta give it up to Gomez for putting up the extra effort promoting this fight, literally writing and performing a diss track to Canelo at the press conference.
Yo para contarlo, el sabor de la derrota, tú vas a probarlo. En vivo y en directo, te tiro y te conecto, los giros y los rectos. Cuando te pedí canela para el arroz con leche del CMB, porque se me ve las ganas de ganarle al bebé. En inglés, you better fucking watch me. Otra vez, you better fucking watch me.
This was Canelo's second defense of the actual WBC junior middleweight title. After being overly outmatched by Miguel Cotto, who casually and unenthusiastically outboxed him to a stoppage, Gomez would go on a 5-fight winning streak and pick up the WBC Continental Americas title against Jesus Soto Karass. After sending Jose Luis Castillo into his shortly lived retirement, that somehow set him up against Canelo, because Canelo had already faced his mandatory opponent earlier that year. You're only required to face one mandatory a year, so the Gomez fight was a fun exhibition to fill in a prelim slate on Mayweather's undercard to the Victor Ortiz fight. In the first, it was looking pretty much identical to the Cotto fight. Gomez is dropped by a jab in both fights. After the knockdown, Gomez would have some moments, but it looked like Canelo was trying to set him up.
Undersized fighter who's like Jose.
Yes, but right now he's got a lot of good defensive skills, but I'm surprised at
And I think right now, Alvarez is a little bit bewildered by the timing and the activity of Alfonso Gomez.
And he very well did towards the end of the 6th round. Canelo lands his signature uppercut, followed up with another shot that leaves Gomez hurt. Gomez now on the defensive, but as soon as it looked like he was about to press forward and mount up an offense, the ref stops the fight, resulting in a TKO win for Canelo.
Good right hand by Canelo, up and under, and then a big right cross across the top. Gomez is badly hurt. Canelo's got a chance to finish, and the referee's gonna stop it right away.
The commentator stating the stoppage was a bit too quick, and from the beginning I would actually agree with them till when the ref was walking Gomez to the opposite end of the ring, Gomez loses his legs completely, which required the ref to basically hold him up against the ropes. The ref quickly signaling to the doctor to bring out the stool for Gomez to sit and recoup while being examined. Same year as the Alfonso Gomez fight, as stated just a moment ago, since Canelo's duties were already fulfilled earlier in the year of 2011, and since the Gomez fight ended quite early, Canelo was fighting for a 4th time since winning the belt back in March of that year. This would sadly be Canelo's last fight in Mexico. Large crowds would flood the Monumental Plaza. Outside of Centron showing some remnants of pre-Margarito Centron, even somewhat bothering Canelo with one shot.
Not easy to really describe his style. He starts out boxing on the perimeter, but he
there
lets
you go.
There's a combination.
That's a central we used to look for.
But then he gets right, like he's ready to fall.
The problem
He
is,
does counter with a right hand, though. And then
Canelo was just too much for him, and he put him away in round 5.
Lead right from Cintron, right hand, hurts Cintron, and down he goes.
because they were afraid of the right hand. But now Alvarez has no fear of the right hand at all.
Good left.
Countering the jab at will. Good time. Like that.
Good combination by Alvarez. And the referee.
In 2010, Canelo was making his second defense of the WBC silver title against 39-year-old IBO champion Lovemore Endo. This was just the perfect fight against the right opponent, tough, durable fighter that gave Canelo a full 12 rounds to where he was able to test and try out new developing weapons to his game, offensively and defensively. Due to the former junior welterweight champion surprisingly having the size advantage, mostly due to Canelo's age, and relentlessly pressing the fight, this made it where Canelo had to fight every round. Whether if it was purposeful or unintentional, Canelo is wearing winning gloves. They are made solely for ultimate protection of your fists. It saps your punching power by a great sum. Though I'm doubtful Canelo was prone to hand injuries early in his career, but it seemed like his team was more worried about getting rounds in, practicing technique rather than getting the knockout. If the knockout comes, it comes. Canelo fights from Ryan Rose and downward. He wore mostly winning gloves. Canelo would win by a complete shutout on 2 out of the 3 judges' scorecards, one judge giving Endo 1 round. Coming fresh off the Golovkin win in September, Canelo decided to fight WBA regular champion Rocky Fielding, since that's every boxer's dream to fight at the Madison Square Garden, the mecca of boxing prize fights. You could say this was the perfect celebratory matchup. This was a party before the fight even started. Just good vibes in the locker room, loud music, folks just jamming. And I would have never known Canelo was negotiating the release of his brother from cartel members in between all of that.
Your brother, right before one of your fights, got kidnapped.
2018, Monday before the fight.
Judging by the Lee and Smith fight and what I saw from Rocky Fielding prior to this fight, I thought it was gonna be an early night if Fielding can't take away Canelo's attack to the body well. And unlike Liam Smith, who could take almost everything Canelo threw at him, too much for his own good, Fielding just didn't have that. Those body shots were eating him up, resulting in a knockdown in every round. All knockdowns but one were caused by a body shot. The final knockdown resulting to the stoppage, Canelo landed a picture-perfect body shot that ended.
That was a headshot, down he goes to the body, and that should do it. It's over. That is it.
If this fight went 12 rounds looking like this would be my number 1. So, December of 2020, Canelo defeated Callum Smith for the WBC, WBA, and Ring Magazine super middleweight titles. Despite not being the mandatory opponent, Yildirim was ranked number 1 by the WBC. This fight was made unusually very early in February because Canelo just came off a Smith fight barely 2 months ago. You don't really see that, especially if it's against a contender. The ring walk may have lasted longer than the fight. I already knew it was bad from the opening bell for Yildirim, as he was approaching Canelo with a watered down Joshua Clottey guard, not pressing the action or anything. It was almost like watching the AI in Fight Night being played on easy mode. Canelo stops him in 3, despite showing signs of purposely trying to carry him through the rounds. Canelo's disappointment on his face just says it all. This fight was mostly a product of the failure of making a Billy Joe Saunders fight made on time to have the Golovkin fight for the undisputed title. #blame Billy. This matchup, despite it being 5 to 6 years too late, as it was talked about in 2011 between the commentators on HBO, this was still a big promotion because of their rivalry and the fact it's the Chavez name, and Chavez Jr. has a chance to set it straight with the Mexican fight fans. I worked all of Canelo's fight weeks from the Cotto fight all the way to the Kovalev fight in 2019. My personal opinion, the Chavez Jr. fight week was definitely the most hectic out of them all. With the crazy fight fans and the workload I had that week, it was insane. I feel like more people showed up for the grand arrival at the Chavez Jr. fight week than than for the Caleb Plant fight or the Golovkin fight. That's how crazy it was. This was just an absolute shutout from the opening bell and on. Canelo putting on a masterclass performance. I don't think Chavez was expecting Canelo to really be physical fighting forward, causing Chavez to fight uncomfortably on the back foot. There wasn't a single round you could have given Chavez. In some moments, he would put on a spirited effort just to get washed out by Canelo shortly after.
Here's where Chavez needs to be. This is where he's could do some damage. And he was in a heavier weight division. So the thought was the size difference will make up for the skills difference. But if Chavez won't even try to impose his size, he's doing it a little bit here now. It's a mismatch, and it was one going in.
That was one of the closest things we've seen for a Chavez rally, and you saw how Canelo responded.
And a little piece of Pancho trivia. Your boy was put up on the duty to create the introduction video to Golovkin's walkout, which was shown during the post-fight, as well as a minute 30-second trailer, which was shown during the post-fight press conference. My years of making fan-made trailers and promos for fights and get comments like HBO needs to get you to make them, then to later do them professionally, and then to finally make a piece to be shown on an actual HBO broadcast. Certainly one of my most memorable moments, just doing what I love, not caring if I didn't have the support from my so-called friends, but you guys, the subscribers, kept me motivated to stay on the right path, and on that day, your boy finally made it. This was for the subscribers and also what was our tiny community here on YouTube at that time, where it wasn't about making commentary videos, clickbait videos. It was about making some dope ass fan promos and highlights with the aspirations just getting acknowledged by the fighter we made the video on, or even the promotion. And with that, as his channel turned 11 years old last month, I thank everyone for the support. I wouldn't be here without you. After numerous requests to do a video on fighters' resumes once they entered world title contention, I thought about it, mostly trying to craft up the title. So here we go, of the very first part of this new series, the resume audit. Let's go through the resume of Vasil Lomachenko. Before we start, how did Vasil get into the position from the start? Well, he had incredible credentials due to his amateur background, raking in 396 wins and 1 loss with 2 Olympic gold medals to his name, which earns him such privileges to move up at whatever pace him and his team believes. There has not been an amateur as great, as dominant as Vasil since Donald Curry, who had the record of 396-4, but Curry himself believes it's 404-4. Either way, he is an underappreciated GOAT who was robbed of competing in the Olympics due to the US's protests of Moscow, becoming the record holder or tire over Sainsek Munksurin of becoming the fastest fighter to become world champion was not really part of the picture originally. Vasil and his team fought in a WSB tournament, raking in 6 fights. So really, Vasil should have been 6-0, but due to a technicality in regards to the gloves, these 6 fights were not official, which Vasil's team fought hard to have them registered as pro fights. This made some headlines in 2013 and 2014, but if you weren't paying attention around that time, it's just a small but very large piece of context that was lost with time. So to compensate with these 6 fights not being recognized, Vasil's team fought tooth and nail to get him a title shot as soon as possible. Due to his credentials as a 2-time gold medalist and the greatest amateur in a long while, he was given a chance to fight for the WBO international title against Jose Luis Ramirez. Ramirez had recently beaten Ray Batista for the title. This is a major regional title to set one up to become a contender. Vasil completely outclassed Ramirez to earn a shot to fight Orlando Salido for the WBO featherweight title. Given the fact that Jose rightfully earned the position to be in the mix for a world title, I will give it a C grade. So let's discuss the weight class at the time. After 2012 going into 2013, this was a transitional period in the weight class. The great champion Chris John was becoming old quick, and he would be dethroned by Simpiwe Vidyeka after 17 title defenses, retiring him in the process at the end of 2013. Abner Mares would get dethroned by veteran former champion Johnny Gonzalez. You had Nicholas Walters moving up and moving up quite quickly. Nonito Donaire in the process of moving up after his defeat against Guillermo Rigondeaux. Gary Russell Jr. making moves as well.
What a shot!
The featherweight class was very much alive coming into 2014. Due to the technicality, Vasil by default was in a position to overtake Muay Thai GOAT turned boxer Sainsik Mugsurin's record of becoming the fastest to become world champion. Orlando Salido would miss weight, so the title is now vacant, and Vasil is now the only person who could win it. Salido came in at 147 pounds in fight day. Having the size and strength advantage, Salido pulled every veteran tactic that Loma was not used to, stacked up a sizable lead before tiring out because of the obvious. The controversy was the insane amount of low blows by Salido, the ref refusing to acknowledge, and you could say a little bit of that Texas judging. This resulted in Vasil losing. Due to the controversy, this set up an unprecedented cross-promotion fight against Gary Russell Jr. This was during the peak of the TV network Cold War, and this fight was sort of signifying it's finally over. Due to Vasil's team mostly urging the promotion to make this fight happen, even if Vasil had to cross over to Showtime and fight Gary Russell. In 2014, Salido was still Salido, and we will see him once again pulling off the same level of performance against contender Turtsek Jangdang in an absolute barn burner for the interim title, to spawn his rivalry against Roman Martinez before truly falling off. I'll give this a B+ grade. From this class of US Olympians, Gary Russell was easily one of the most talented fighters, some of the fastest hands in the sport, and everyone was painstakingly waiting for his shot to fight for the world title.
En algunos choques. Bien la velocidad de Gary Russell. Sin embargo, y Estrada también parece decirle yo puedo pegar rápido. Pero es espectacular este Gary Russell,
as he raked up 24 fights. This matchup was a match made in heaven because both guys were supposed to cross paths in the 2008 Olympics, but due to Gary getting sick, he was forced to retire from the games. Due to Vasil's performance against Salido, more people sided with Gary Russell, despite Gary Russell being the slight betting underdog. To the fight fans' shock, Vasil would completely outclass Gary to win by a questionable majority decision to tie the record. This gets an A+ grade because of the obvious. First defense for Vasil, the 51-1 Chan Lathorn was ranked number 2 by the WBO. He was the WBO Asian champion due to his rank within the organization, and since his fight was in Macau, China, which it's a card mostly highlighting Asian fighters, it was most suiting for the Pacific region audiences. Vasil would dominate the fight, dropping him in the 4th round, but was not able to get a stoppage, resulting in a wide unanimous decision. I'll give this a B- because he was ranked. Before I touch on this, I must say Mayweather-Pacquiao was the worst undercard ever assembled in prize fight history of the 2010s. It was bad on paper, and it was bad when it happened. I think everyone was expecting a Mayweather-Canelo type of undercard, where we would get a great co-main. At the time, everyone was trying to see a fight between Leo Santa Cruz and Guillermo Rigondeaux to unify the division, but instead, Leo fought some guy outside of the top 50 ranks on a week or two notice and fought him to a decision. Rodriguez beat Orlando Cruz for the WBO and NBO title, important regional belt signifying you're the best WBO ranked fighter in North America. He was ranked number 1 by the organization. He is the best opponent for Vasil, but the fight everyone wants to see is him unifying against WBA champion Nicholas Walters, who is just obliterating guys at the time. Lomachenko would make easy work of Rodriguez, getting the KO in the 9th round. I'd give this a B- grade. He was ranked by the organization, but he did not have top 10 world rankings, but he was a contender, and Vasil is doing his job of fighting the best fighter available within his organization and TV network, because we cannot forget about the promotional divide. This will be his last fight at featherweight and the worst on his resume. Who knows what the plans were, because Oscar Valdez was ranked number 1 by the WBO, and did they want him fighting Vasil so early? And this is around the time Walters had moved up to super featherweight and he was a household name. That was still the matchup to be made. I can only assume, and they just had to fill someone in. and it was not of quality. Let's say it wasn't Top Rank's plan of spoiling their new prospect, Oscar Valdez. That still leaves number 3 ranked Matias, which Valdez goes on to fight for Vasil's vacant title. I give this a D- grade. Just coming off his rivalry against Orlando Salido, the judging in the rematch was rather suspect. I felt like Martinez's last hurrah was in their first fight. He would be brutally dethroned by Vasil, and this will set up Vasil's fight with Nicholas Walters. I give this a C+ rating. Martinez had the title, had top 5 rankings, but I personally thought he was over the hill, and it was in due time. He's a massive target to be dethroned. Vasil's first defense would be against Nicholas Walters. Walters coming off a draw against Jason Sosa. He just didn't seem like the Walters that was slaying guys at featherweight. Vasil would run circles around Walters, forcing a guy with all this power to be fighting on his back foot and be on the defensive, to where Walters retired from his corner in the 7th round. Not only retired from the fight, but from boxing altogether. He'll make a comeback this year as I'm speaking. This would be Vasil's best opponent so far. I give it A-. This fight should have happened a little bit earlier, I believe, when Walters could still make weight at featherweight. After the draw against Walters, Sosa would prove how underrated he was in the weight class by upsetting the undefeated Javier Fortuna in the 11th round for the WBA regular title. After a defense against contender Stephen Smith, Sosa, now ranked number 9 by Ring Magazine, was matched up to fight Lomachenko. My honest opinion, because the Salido fight was still fresh, Sosa was going to make this pretty close early on. That did not happen, and Sosa got completely dominated before it was stopped in the 9th round. I give this a B+ grade. Jason Sosa in his own right was world class, but he had the WBA regular title. The real WBA champion at that time was Takashi Uchiyama. That's why Sosa was forced to relinquish the WBA title before even fighting Vasil, because the WBO did not recognize the WBA regular title as a real title. Certainly a missed opportunity to unify the division, and in retrospect of what happened with the WBA belt in that weight class, it would have certainly saved everyone the headache. So Orlando Salido found himself number 1 in the WBO rankings, and there was a rematch in talks. The rematch did not happen. This fight is a result of it. Vasil obliterates this guy. Miguel came off a decision loss against Oscar Valdez in a grinder of a fight. Vasil just made it look too easy. I give this a C+. He's not in the top 10 ranks, not in the WBO top ranks. I can't even find him in the top 15 for the month before he was fighting in both featherweight and super featherweight. His only status is going 12 rounds with Nicholas Walters at featherweight and 12 hard rounds with Oscar Valdez, and that was it.
Has Bob Arum's been talking about you and Rigondeaux in the not too distant future? What are your thoughts about that fight?
I think it'll be fine. I'll need a couple more fights before we go about it.
Is that out of respect for Rigondeaux's professional skill at this point?
Уважаешь Ригон?
Кого?
Ты уважаешь?
Ригон, конечно.
Yeah, of course.
This fight was a result of a lot of political BS from boxing belt organizations, networks, and promotions. Due to poor marketing, management, and matchmaking, Rigondeaux was put into a bad position where he was blacklisted by the Western boxing establishment. The writing was on the wall, and after possibly his most exciting fight against Amagasa, he should have very well went back to Japan to face contender Shingo Wake and Yoshinori Oguni. But instead, his career remained in limbo out in the West where no one wanted to fight him. WBA regular champ Scott Quigg and his handlers wanted no part of this guy, to where you can say a deal was made for Rigo to just take a walk. So that fight between Quigg and Frampton can be a vacation, because like I said earlier, the regular title is not a real title. So fast forward, no option to fight anybody. the Lomachenko fight was offered, since I'm sure the Salido fight was off the table. This was billed as an even matchup just because Rigo was feared by so many because of his style, his underrated power. He broke the jaw of Amagasa, a man that outsized weighed him by so much. Instead of being on the defensive for the rest of the fight, he put on his best offensive performance, and that right there should scare anyone from super bantamweight all the way to featherweight, because Amagasa he's really pretty much almost a lightweight. Then to follow up and break the jaw of James Dickens. What would happen in the fight would be quite shocking, and Rigo would retire from the fight and take a 2-year hiatus. I would give this a B- grade due to everything leading up to this fight. Rigo still had rank, not only in the world rankings but pound for pound as well. After a matchup like Loma versus Rigo, where it was pretty split of positive and negative views, Lomachenko had to have something big and undisputably a wow factor of a matchup. The Linares fight was that fight. Bad case for Linares because Linares made an amazing career comeback, teaming up with Salas, winning the WBC title, but things would happen where he was named the champion in recess, and his unification against Krolla was just for the WBA and ring title. The WBC just doing a diamond belt for that fight. Mikey Garcia went on to become the WBC champion. After Linares beat Krolla in their rematch, putting on the best performance of his career, everyone was expecting Mikey and Jorge to unify. I just don't think it was enough money for Mikey. Linares taken promotions and Golden Boy tailored a contract to Mikey's liking. Mikey was stated that he wanted no exclusivity fight deal, just a one-fight deal and he goes back to wherever. They had pretty much everything. Who knows how much the purse was, because Mikey chose money over unifying for legacy, moved up and fought Broner for a career high purse in a non-titled bout. Linares went on to fight Luke Campbell, and who really knows if there was a second attempt, but the Lomachenko fight was a direct result of the Mikey fight not happening. This was a matchup where both guys needed each other. Linares was at his absolute peak, and he wanted a big fight to put himself in another level in the sport where he was supposed to have been, if not for his misfortunes. Vasil needed a guy above his level who was undisputably the best fighter in the weight class. When you have a matchup like that where both guys need each other, you're going to see something special. Now there is one thing I like to note that, my opinion, this is one of the biggest boneheaded things and betrayals. Linares had been with Salas for years now. He is technically his best fighter at the moment, and this is the biggest fight of Jorge's career. Why the hell did he take the job to train David Haye for the Tony Bellew rematch, which is just days apart from each other? Rudy Hernandez took over the head coaching job for this fight. Again, this is all just my opinion here. Things may have been a bit different if Linares had his trainer 100% through camp and at the fight. But anyways, it was highly competitive, and when Vasil looked like he was getting the momentum, Linares set him up with the perfect shot, dropping Vasil for the first time in his career. Just back and forth from the two, and despite it being even in the 10th round, Vasil would catch Linares with a sneaky picture perfect body shot. He was unable to get up in time. Vasil would make history to become the fastest 3-division world champion in 12 fights. I rate this an S-grade matchup. Vasil moves up in his first fight, fights a legitimate champion in the weight class who is at their absolute peak of their career. Lomachenko would face former champion and current number 4 ranked Anthony Krolla, who was in a 4-fight win streak after his rivalry against Linares. Lomachenko would completely dominate the fight and stop Krolla in the 4th round. I rank this a B+ grade. Krolla is ranked in the top 5. He was the best option given the political climate, because the WBC and IBF champion Mikey Garcia was certainly not going to face Lomachenko due to a laundry list of reasons for the undisputed title, the network and promotion divide being at the top of the reasons. So we just saw Mikey once again take the money and move up to fight Errol Spence Jr. for career high purse instead of becoming undisputed. Part of Vasil's journey to becoming undisputed, this fight was for Mikey Garcia's WBC title that went vacant. Luke Campbell was ranked number 1 by the WBC and number 4 by Ring Magazine. Campbell would touch up Vasil a couple of times, but overall it was a dominant performance by Vasil to earn the wide unanimous decision. I give this an A-. Campbell was ranked in the top 5, number 1 by the WBC and number 9 by the WBA. Teofimo really wanted this fight with Lomachenko, but he did what no other fighter was willing to do. If you want to fight with a guy of Vasil's stature, or any fighter of his stature, you need to get in his way of what he wants to force a fight with him. Because if you're not the mandatory and it's not your time up, you're just going to be waiting. Vasil is trying to become undisputed champion. The most sure bet to get in his way and force a fight is if he gets the IBF title before he does. Lopez wins every single regional credential, NABF, IBF USBA, and the NABA. You can say whatever about this man, but you cannot hate the hustle here. He won every regional credential to undisputedly earn himself a title elimination bout against Nakatani, then fight for the IBF title against Kami. After beating Kami, he is now directly in the path of Lomachenko. He wants Loma, and Loma wants his belt to meet his ultimate goal, and this made a great matchup. A classic performance by the two, which Vasil came up just short, despite fighting injured. This is an S-tier grade. Teofimo was in his prime, peak confidence. You really have to want it to take all those side quests to get a title shot to make this matchup happen. He didn't do what other fighters were doing on social media, playing the victim, saying they're being ducked. He went out and he did it, because Teofimo did not have to fight those dudes to move up so fast as he did with the IBF. If not, it would have been Kami or Nakatani against Lomachenko for the undisputed title. Dude got red pilled on that one boxing business aspect and went on one crazy run. In Vasil's comeback fight, he would face the number 10 ranked Masayoshi Nakatani. Nakatani had the reputation already of giving Lopez some trouble besides losing pretty wide on the cards. The reason why the betting odds was so lopsided to begin with in their fight. Nakatani came off a big win defeating Felix Verdejo for the WBO Intercontinental title. It was a mixed bag early, but Vasil would run through Nakatani, stopping him in the 9th round. I rate this a B+. Nakatani had top 10 rank and showed that he is one of the best in the weight class. This was for the vacant WBO Intercontinental title. Kami was ranked number 3 in the weight class. If Vasil ever wanted to get back into position to get his titles, and then some back, he would need to get past Kami. Vasil would brutally beat Richard for 12 rounds, somehow avoiding a stoppage to win by a wide unanimous decision. I rate this an A+. Kami is ranked in the top 3, and he is a must-fight opponent to get back in title contention. I think we all know what was happening in the career around this time with Vasil. His comeback fight from his military duties was against undefeated prospect Ortiz. Ortiz became the NABF champ, beating Nahir Albright, then beating former champion Jamel Herring for the IBF USBA title. Vasil would fight him to a unanimous decision. Good performance due to the context of the situation. I give this a B+ due to the obvious. Haney beat the guy that beat the guy not once but twice in his backyard to become undisputed, making him the guy to fight in the weight class. This fight was highly competitive throughout, Vasil taking over the final quarter of the fight to just lose by a very close unanimous decision. Me personally, I think if the fight was ruled a split decision or a draw, both parties and even fan bases wouldn't have batted an eye. It was a real close fight. What really bit Vasil in the butt here, gotta be honest here, the mid rounds 4 through 7, rounds 6 and 7 being swing rounds, where depending what type of judge you are, what you consider a winning round, it could go to either guy. Round 11, Vasil should have followed through and did his best to force a knockdown. 12th round did not help either, as you can give it to both guys that round. Vasil landing what he can, scoring to the head, and Haney, with now a second win, landing to the body at a high percentage and whatever he could score to the head. I think many were wowed by all the shots landed to the head of Haney, but we can't ignore Haney was matching Vasil with the body shots. If this was the amateurs, absolutely, Vasil would have won because body shots, you're rarely ever given points for landing. But this is professional boxing, where you are pointed on several categories: body, head, punch count / volume, and the effectiveness of the punch volume. So in conclusion, this matchup is an S tier rating. Vasil's resume overall, I give an A+ rating. He has a hell of a resume. I think some are put off by the low amount of fights he has, but he was fighting opponents within the top 20, then the top 10 ranks very early in his career. In this context, 17-3 is very impressive. So for example, let's take a legend like Mike Tyson, where we are only counting his fights against ranked competition within the top 20 in the world. by either record books or belt organizations, which his first ranked guy was Mitch Green, who was ranked number 7 by the WBC in his 21st pro bout. Tyson, to end his career, 28-6 with 1 no contest. Out of context, it doesn't look so nice, and this is what quite a bit of fighters with the low fight count but stacked resume have to deal with when it comes to the Hall of Fame, especially if they don't fight in America. Perfect example, the Japanese great Yoko Gushkin became champ and his 9th pro bout, made 13 title defenses before being dethroned. He retired after that loss, despite being widely acknowledged by Japanese press as one of the greatest Japanese fighters to ever do it. He didn't get inducted in the Hall of Fame till 30 plus years after the fact. Same thing with Masao Oba, who you can describe as Japan's Salvador Sanchez. Both were seen as the greatest of their nation for a long while due to what they were able to achieve by the age of 23. Both passed away in a car crash 23 days after their final title defense. Both passed away at the age of 23. Pretty crazy coincidence here. Masao was recognized and inducted in 2015, 40 plus years later. When it's all said and done, Vasil should very well be in the Hall of Fame for what he was able to achieve, and on top of that, this is a resume audit of Vasil Lomachenko.